Okay. Call the meeting to order. Roll call. We're just missing Jim this morning. Approval of the January 14, 2019 minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? If they have, are there any errors or corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Approval of today's agenda. I'd entertain a motion for that.
I'll so move.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. For the audience, if you don't have a copy of today's agenda, you're welcome to get one on the back bookshelf. That way you can follow along with all the items that we're going to go through. PJ, let's go through the consent agenda.
Sure, PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department, consent agenda. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the Planning Commissioner recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make the final decision. Item 3, conditional use permit review 1433 for Lenora and Larry Rulin to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a permanent residence in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1433 with 8 conditions. Item 4, conditional use permit review 1744 for Jeff Miller to review a vacation home rental on the subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1744 with 15 conditions. Item 5, conditional use permit review 1750 for Benjamin Schilling to review a gunsmithing business on the subject property in a limited agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit 1750 to the February 25th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting.
PJ, I'm amazed we're done with the consent agenda. That's so fast.
I know, that's the shortest one we've had.
I think this is the shortest one we've had. Are there any items that the staff would like to pull off of the consent agenda?
No, sir.
Membership, any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
No.
All right. Audience members, items 3, 4, and 5 are going to be voted on in one vote. If there's any items that y'all would like to have reviewed separately, please come forward and let us know. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda of items 3 through 5.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
That takes us to item number 6.
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. Item 6 is rezone 1812 and Comprehensive Plan 1811 to rezone 19.419 acres from General Agriculture District to General Commercial District for proposed Lot 1, and to rezone 1.953 acres from General Agriculture District to General Commercial District for proposed Lot 2. As the property stands today, it is zoned General Agriculture District. The future land use is Low Density Residential District. It's one lot. Currently, it's 21 acres. They have submitted plats that were approved with the condition that a lot size variance or a rezone is done on this property. They did attempt to do a lot size variance on this property, and it was denied by the Board of Adjustment. The access off this road is currently off Pine Haven Road. Pine Haven Road is a 66-foot wide public access easement that was platted in 1995. It is within the Pine Haven Road District. Let me see. Proposed Lot 1 doesn't contain any structures. It's completely vacant. And Lot 2 has 6 existing billboards. This was routed around to through the interdepartmental review process, and there were no items of concern that came back except for DOT, where there wasn't going to be any additional accesses off of Highway 16. In a general commercial district, examples of permitted uses are retail establishments, storage, display, sale of new, used, repossessed, traded merchandise, barber and beauty shops, cleaning, dyeing, medical, dental clinics, hotels, motels, clubs, lodges. Those are just examples. That's not an inclusive list. Staff is recommending approval of rezone 1812 and Comprehensive Plan Amendment 1811 due to the fact that there is general commercial existing in the area currently and highway service district, which have similar uses. So I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for staff? Well, I have one question. Why was it denied the variance? Is there
a lot size variance?
The lot size.
The Board of Commissioners denied the lot size variance.
Right, but anything in particular, any
I don't
specific
remember,
reason?
was there any? I don't remember it being any particular reason. It just didn't meet the requirements of the zoning district.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I guess we'll open it up to the public. Is the applicant here for this item? Would he like to speak first? All right, is there any other individuals that like to speak on behalf of this item?
Thank you. My name is Bill Hearn. I'm going to testify here in wearing two hats. One is a personal landowner in the area, and the other is the president of the Pine Haven Road District. On the personal basis, when we purchased our home in 2011, I was concerned about what would happen with this area. And there's really two lots here, lot 1 and 2. We don't have, or I don't have an objection to the lot 2 where the signs are being zoned general commercial, but have a lot of concern about lot 1 being moved to general commercial from the comprehensive plan, which calls for low density residential. When we purchased our home in 2011, I was concerned about that usage, so I referred myself to the comprehensive plan, which shows low density residential. I was comfortable for that, went forward with the purchase of the home. You know, a change now kind of seems to me like a change in the rules after the game started. But we have had, you know, as I mentioned, there is some commercial property in the area. There's a lodge there next to the property. And personally, we've had one kind of egregious trespass issue from that that's only been in existence for a year. That required calling the county sheriff, and they came out and helped mediate the situation, get it toned down a little bit. They asked me if I wanted to have the person arrested. I told them no, but I did meet with the property owner, and we kind of worked some stuff out privately, and he's going to try to mitigate that kind of thing happening again in the future. We'll see this year if in fact that happens. You know, all I want personally is quiet enjoyment of a home. You have a well thought out comprehensive plan, so you know, I'd encourage you to follow that plan and not make changes to it. So now I'm going to change hats. I'm going to talk as the president of the Pine Haven Road District. The road was not constructed or designed for commercial traffic. The road is currently used, it's a dead-end road, currently used by the neighborhood people. You see a lot of, I mean, daily, people are walking, you know, as couples. There's kids on striders. There's moms pushing kids in strollers. There's dog hikes. There's joggers. All of those kinds of things, which are pretty inconsistent with commercial traffic on the road. The sign that, I'll give you this, that is right in front. As you enter the property, you know, it says no outlet and slow children at play. So that's the current signage that we use to help protect the neighborhood there a little bit.
Bill, can I interrupt you real quick second? Where is that at on Pine Haven? Is that down there at 16 in Pine Haven as you come onto it?
As soon as you make the turn on the Pine Haven 30 yards, that's where that sign is.
Okay.
Okay, right at the entrance. Okay, probably not even 30 yards, but real close. You know, I tried to do as much review as I could, and I'm sure it's not comprehensive, but I was trying to find other places in the county where the access to general commercial property was through a residential area controlled by a road district. I could find no instances of that. They may occur, but I could not find them. But I'm thinking that's a pretty rare occurrence that you run commercial traffic through a residential area that's run by a road district. Okay, so I didn't know if that's a change of policy of the county or what's going on there.
Excuse me, sir. Is there a road district formed?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it might help here. Is it possible for y'all to get, that's from the planning input from the staff. Can you put that on the screen?
Oh. And then would you mind showing,
We already have that.
you indicated,
Well,
You just have a more,
okay, all right. It's pretty hard to see it in that, but if you could blow it up. Okay. The dotted line there through the yellow, That is the Pine Haven Road District's road. Can I use the cursor and maybe show it that?
We have it right here, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you use the pen
Okay.
though, it's gonna reverse it back to the.
Okay, so this is the Pine Haven Road right here. It comes up, and then there's a piece that runs here, a piece that runs there, and a piece that runs right here. That's the Pine Haven Road District, okay? The access point that we're talking about, that staff is recommending, is right there, okay?
It's on that northwest corner. Gotcha.
Okay, does that help? Like I said, I can't find any place in the county where we're running commercial traffic through a kind of a high-end residential area on a road district to provide commercial traffic. You know, the guidelines that we use as the road district is that there is one access per lot. All lots are residential, and all access points meet the engineering guidelines that are presented by the county. And I have those if you want to look at them, but you're probably familiar with those as far as culvert size and gravel and slope and all those kinds of things. So all the properties in the area right now meet all of those criteria. This property right now in the access probably wouldn't meet any of those criteria. So it'd certainly be an exception to what we do at on the road district. You know, the staff recommendation is that road be used for the access to the commercial property if it was zoned commercial. We believe, or the road district believes, that the county commission, a month and a half ago or so, approved an access point there for the commercial use of that. We believe that granting of that is invalid. And the reason we believe that is there is a state law, 3124-6, that deals with this issue. And I'll just read the last part of it. The first part of it just says it has to be done at owner's expense and stuff. But however, and this deals when there is a road district of who the controlling authority is to access of the road, okay? And the road district, when they're formed, the county basically cedes control of that to the road district. So when the county granted that permit, we think that's invalid. And my guess is maybe they weren't aware of this state law. I don't know. But however, no entrance may be constructed until the landowner has obtained a permit from the authority whose duty it is to maintain the highway for construction of the entrance. The entrance shall be constructed in accordance with the plans approved by the authority. The authority shall fix the width, location, and entrance of the entrance, and the entrance shall be constructed according therewith. So I think that's pretty clear. To follow up on that, I talked with Mark Schock at the county DOT, and they had provided guidance to the commission. But he told me very clearly, he says, if there's a road district involved, the road district has control, not the county, if you're going to access that road district. He provided, prior to the meeting, he provided guidance to the commissioners. And what he wrote was an approach permit will be required, okay? He thought it was obvious that that permit had to come from the road district. He says in hindsight, he wished he had stated from the road district. But he didn't state that with the guidance, okay? Because he says nowhere else in the county have they ever approved an access on a road. The county doesn't approve access to road districts, okay? That's the responsibility of the road district. So our position would be that access point is invalid. Let's see. Also, along with that, when that hearing was held, the Pine Haven Road District never got any notice as to that hearing, and there was no sign placed at the point of entrance saying that there was going to be a hearing. That certainly doesn't seem quite right. That should be party to a discussion and don't even know that it occurred, okay? I don't know how that happens, but that's what happened. The average appraised value of the homes that the commercial traffic would pass getting to this thing is $723,000, so about $723,000. So, you know, this is a fairly upscale neighborhood, you know, that wouldn't take favorable to having commercial traffic on a dead-end road. The Pine Haven Road District would not object to the property being zoned low-density residential, and we're talking about Lot 1 here. And I feel we could reach an access agreement satisfactory for all parties for low-density residential. Low-density residential fits the current use of the neighborhood and the road usage. However, if the property is zoned general commercial, the Pine Haven Road District will vigorously oppose and use all legal means and appeal processes to prevent access of using the Pine Haven Road District. It's essentially the note that the property is not landlocked. It isn't like that's the only access. This picture here is an existing access off of Highway 16. Pass that down. That's already there, and that is used currently to access the property with sign maintenance trucks for the billboards that are along there, and to bring agricultural equipment in for the haying of Lot 1. Okay, and that access point is already there. So again, since you already have an access off of a commercial highway for commercial traffic that would go to a commercial district, to me, it's certainly not very good planning to run that traffic through a residential area on a road district, okay, when you have a whole other option that seems better suited for that. I want to address the issues of the staff recommendations a little bit and kind of give a little rebuttal to their recommendations there. When I read through the package that I know you all get a lot of stuff on Friday and probably don't get a chance to read everything, but this is the package that you received. When I look at that, there was really two issues that staff used in making their recommendation. One was the access point, okay, which again I think is invalid, or we think is invalid. And the other is that there was already general commercial properties in the area. The two red spots there, you know, those are the two commercial properties in question. The smaller one to the south is the Gaslight Restaurant. And while I guess you could say it's in the general area, my home would be the closest to that. But you cannot, the line, you know, it drops, some of you, you know, don't live in the area necessarily, but as you drive out there, the Gaslight, you know, drops down the hill, okay, by quite a bit. So from the residential area, you can't see the Gaslight, you can't hear the Gaslight, you can't smell the Gaslight, okay? So, you know, that property, using that as a comparable analysis, I think is really not correct because it doesn't have any impact, and it produces no traffic to Pine Haven Drive, okay? The other property is the lodge that was recently renovated there, the one on the left, the red property, right here, okay? There are several things with that property that planning staff is probably not aware of, and I'm sure you all aren't aware of. That property had kind of fallen in disrepair for a number of years and was sort of falling apart. They had tried to sell it a number of times. In June of 2014, I saw a gentleman out there looking at the property, and I'm a neighbor, so I just went over to talk to him. And he indicated that he wanted to buy the property. I said, well, what's your idea of it? He said, well, I deal in controversial properties. So we kind of talked a little bit, and I asked, you know, tell me about this controversial property issue. He says, well, what I want to do is I want to rehab this to minimum habitable standards and contract with the state to house convicted felons as a halfway transition into society. And I said, boy, that's not a very good use for this neighborhood. He responded with a verb and a pronoun. It says, you know, general commercial allows me to do that. And I said, well, that part is true. So very quickly, in about a 24-hour period, we organized a group within the neighborhood, 9 property owners and 22 people, and we purchased the property. Okay, I was not confident that by appealing to the planning commission or whatever, since that use was allowed under general commercial, that we would win that battle. So he thought we needed to do something else. So we purchased the property, spent about $250,000 to buy it. We then placed very restrictive covenants and restrictions on the property to mitigate undesirable uses in the neighborhood, and then remarketed the property. And, you know, it's since been sold, and the quality facility you see there now as a result of that. But I bring that up to mention two things. One, while true it is zoned general commercial, there's a whole list of things that cannot be done with that property now. So it's kind of quasi-general commercial, I guess I would say.
Is that based on like a home, I mean, it's obviously not a homeowners association, but it's based on some covenants through a contract, or how does that work?
The restrictions that were placed on it, they were deed restrictions and covenants that were filed against the property. So all future use follows those. They're on file at the courthouse.
Do you have a copy of those by chance?
I do not. Maybe anybody bring that? No, I do not have that.
Okay.
But you know, what we're trying to do is to make sure that the use of that property isn't something that would negatively impact the community. For the most part, that's been successful. There's been a few hiccups, but it's only been in operation 1 year, and I feel fairly confident we'll be able to work with the operator, and those conflicts we've had, hopefully we'll resolve those, but we'll see. But I guess the point is we don't want more of that. We've already had some, okay? And we don't want more of that in the neighborhood. So it's kind of an incompatible use for the property.
Bill, if I can interrupt one other time, is that where the trespass issue came from that particular property?
The issue I had was a trespass, yes.
Okay. Just
Okay.
wanna-
There's been some others that other people will talk about here. A couple of other points here. If you look of the occupied land that's adjacent to this, you have this boundary and that boundary, that west boundary and the north boundary, okay? And if you measure the distance of this, okay, 83% of the interface of that is against residential property. Only 17% is against abuts the commercial property. So to me, that speaks very highly that the preponderance of use is residential, not commercial. So to say, well, okay, we got one commercial place there, so we can put in others. To me, that doesn't make much sense when almost everything is residential, not commercial. Okay. Let's see. This action by the homeowner shows the commitment of the neighborhood to preserving kind of the quiet enjoyment of our home. We're not opposed to spending money when we have to ensure that, and that's pretty valuable to us. Low density residential would be acceptable, general commercial is not. That probably concludes my portion of the presentation here. Would any of you have questions or ask for clarification on anything that I might have said?
Any questions for Bill? Sandy?
Go ahead. You had indicated at the beginning of your conversation that you had no objection to a portion of this being zoned general commercial. Could you show me which portion that you had no objection to, or to which you had no objection?
That map is so small, it doesn't really show that, but
Hey, can we get a different map up there so you can maybe, roughly?
It's in your staff reports, under the plat. I don't know if it's in, there you go, right there.
here's,
Proposed lot 2.
Here, Sandy, it's up
I don't
there.
have a cursor here, but that long strip there of lot 2,
I see.
that adjoins Highway 16.
I see, thank you.
That's
It was-
the billboards are spaced out
Right.
along that, and I believe he wants to keep that so he can get the revenue off the billboards. But the lot 1 is the area that we are concerned about, that is almost totally surrounded by residential, other than the highway. And that's our concern. The other thing is that it's kind of a matter of scale here too. The two properties referenced in the staff recommendations versus this property, the lot 1 is way, way bigger than those little properties, okay? So there's a pretty big difference in scope and size of this versus the existing properties that are there, that are commercial, okay?
Is that 66 feet wide? I can't tell for sure.
The lot,
The depth of lot 2.
I had trouble reading that too, and the copies I had didn't really show.
Well,
I think the access easement's what, 66 feet wide.
I see.
Yeah, and that's right here.
Yeah.
65.56,
I'm sorry, what?
It says 65.58 feet.
It's just a long, narrow strip.
Okay, but I'm wondering if it's deep enough for commercial use.
Well, like I said, we
Probably
don't,
not.
No,
Yeah.
we don't have,
Yeah.
it's for all those billboards.
we don't have an objection to that piece. We certainly have
Sure.
an objection to lot one.
Yeah, I understand. I have heard the word you said.
Okay, any other?
Any other questions? Kathy, did I see you were
Yeah, but I think
interested?
I figured it out. I was just gonna ask that, I thought that the access to the lodge, you turn in on Pine Haven, but then there's a road parallel to 16 that
Right,
goes
it's on
back
their property.
to
They
that.
go probably, I don't know, 100 feet or so on Pine Haven Drive and turn in.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah, okay. And that little stretch, I mean, where that road is over to the lodge
That's
is
their
actually their property, I
That's
see,
their property.
okay. Thank you.
Rich, did you have any questions?
Mr. Chair, yes.
Go ahead.
If I heard staff correctly, and maybe this is more of a question for staff, but there's an access easement in the proposed plat, yet the Department of Transportation is going to deny an approach permit. Is that correct?
That was one of my questions, but thanks for asking, Rich.
Yes, Rich, they don't want access off of the Highway 16. They'll give access just for that front lot to maintain billboards. But Pine Haven, and excuse me, on here, if you look at, just for clarification, up here is where that road construction in the section line was done. So this little area right here is
see where
Pine
you're drawing
Haven
it.
Drive. And where,
Oh, there you go.
excuse me, and when Pine Haven Drive was platted back in 1995, it was platted as a public access easement. So when staff looks at that, and in addition to that, Lot 1 is part of the road district. So
So lot 1 falls under the road district?
according to the applicant, yes, it is within the road district.
Okay. Any further questions for staff while Brittany's there?
So shouldn't that access easement be cut short of the, tying into Lot 1 if it's not allowed?
What do you mean if it's not allowed?
Well, I'm saying the access easement should only be a certain part of the depth of Lot 2 and not extend all the way to Lot 1.
Right, that was part of the plat and approved as part of the plat with the understanding that it would just be used to access to maintain those billboards.
But they do not have permission from the Department of Transportation for an approach
They don't
there.
have an approach permit from the Department of Transportation to access it that I'm aware of. Do you? Correct.
And is there a reason why they didn't give them access? I mean, other than, is there traffic volume issues or what's the?
I do not know the exact answer to that, but with at abutting Pine Haven Drive, they did get approval from the Board of Commissioners to do road construction in the section line right of way. When that application was submitted, there was an approach permit submitted with that application.
Any further questions for staff?
No.
Okay. Any further questions for Bill? Just a second, sir. Any clarification questions for Bill?
Let me just address that a little bit. When I talked to, the county DOT, the fact that that's on the section line, they said it doesn't matter. I mean, the access, the controlling authority is the Pine Haven Road District, not the county. And just because it crosses the section line that situation occurs many, many places in the county. And, it's always been the road district that controls that, not the county. So that's why we think that the access permit that was granted is invalid, okay? So hopefully that clarifies that a little bit.
Thank you. Brittany, I have one more question about that section line. So correct me if I'm wrong, Pine Haven doesn't run along the section line. Pine Haven only captures right there at the very northwest corner of that, but the section line is north to south from the highway, and there's no road on that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because I get it, there's a section line access, but if the road doesn't run through there, then how would they get access to it? Unless they're going to be, Pine Haven is a private road. That's how the road districts work, if I understand. Is that correct?
Pine Haven is in the road district. And for clarification, my understanding of codified law with the section line rights of way, the Board of Commissioners has to approve any construction within section line right of ways in counties. There's no mention of road districts at all in that statute. It's only townships and Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Any further questions?
Just one. So, sir, you would have no objection to lot 1, lot 2, whatever, all being zoned general commercial, as long as they did not access it off of the road in your road district. Is that correct?
Quite accurate. If it was zoned general commercial, which I hope doesn't happen, we absolutely would fight access on the road, okay? If it was zoned low-density residential, I think it fits the rest of the neighborhood. The homes that would be built would be the same style and price range and stuff, and that would be fine, okay? So there's two different things there. So we would object to that being commercial for other reasons that people are going to talk about here. As far as that 66-foot easement there, it's worth noting that if you go down the road back towards Rapid City on Highway 16, right prior to where the Strata Bowl turnoff is, just recently an access has been built there off of Highway 16 to service one residential lot. Okay. So there's certainly precedent for, having access there that was just done in the last couple of months, and it services one residential lot.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other individuals like to comment on this item? I'm going to ask that, how many people are here for this particular item to comment on it? Okay, since there's a lot more here than I expected, normally we don't, give time limits unless we know there's a lot of individuals here. Can we just at least keep it to, if we've already hit one particular item, let's not reiterate that one. You can say, I agree with so-and-so's points, but then hit only new points if we can do that, please.
And that would be my starting remarks. My name is Ryan Flick. I'm actually the adjacent owner to the land on lot 13, right next to the lot 1 proposed. I agree the sentiments. I feel that the plan was complete and well written at the time. It does make more sense to be earmarked as low-density residential in that area, and obviously Bill has gone over that reasoning behind it. I did just want to point out to you guys, if you haven't had an opportunity to read the current comprehensive plan, just point out a couple areas in the comprehensive plan. In section 1.3, purpose of meaning of the comprehensive plan, this comprehensive plan will examine a number of concerns that affect quality of life, current development, and future growth in Pennington County. The comprehensive plan will examine the history and demographics of the area, economic factors, geographic descriptions, transportation issues, and drainage plan will identify current floodplain management policies examined, and finally a future land use section will guide future growth for development in Pennington County. A set of goals and policies will be provided for each section of the plan. A comprehensive plan can provide valuable information and guidance to those making important economic decisions such as local officials, land developers, existing and prospective residents, employees, and business owners. I will say, when I read that, I bought in Pine Haven 3 years ago based on those factors as well. We did ask when we purchased that land what that land was to be used for. Our realtor at the time, which was Kelly Howie of Remax Realty, looked into it and said it's currently zoned agricultural, but looks like on the long-term plan for low-density residential. So at most, you'll have houses behind you. And we were fine with that, saying, okay, that conforms with the neighborhood, we're ready to buy. So we purchased the home based on that. Some of the goals that are mentioned in that, there's one specific that I just want to read, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, but Chapter 6, Future Land Use. That is on the goal sheet, and the policies of that would be to ensure the quality, location, and type of commercial land uses that are related to the needs and demands of the local population. I would say that local population would be the residents in that area, with 83% of that land abutting residential or low-density residential neighborhood. Industrial areas should consider all significant environmental constraints that there is direct access to adequate transportation facilities and all industrial areas are compatible with their surrounding uses. Encourage the infilling of vacant residential land in order to promote the existing infrastructure. Provide for stable neighborhoods by minimizing adverse effects from conflicting land uses. That says it pretty specifically to me. Ensure that residential growth takes place in an orderly and efficient manner so that public facilities and needed services can be adequately provided. Residential development should occur in the areas where urban services such as adequate water and sewage disposal are accessible, so the greatest amounts of benefit yet the lowest cost to maintain are achieved. Transition between types of land uses, especially between conflicting land uses, shall be orderly and efficient through the use of buffers such as increased setbacks, open space, fencing, and landscaping. And I would say that I will push very, very hard, being a landowner that has most of the frontage on that, but there would be maximum setbacks and screening involved with that if it ever did get brought to commercial use. Ensure that all development is an asset to the community in terms of appearance and impact on community facilities and the natural environment. That says it pretty well. I would say that I would agree completely with the plan as it sits right now, that makes the claim of keeping it low-density residential or earmarking it as low-density residential. The other information that I do have here, I wish I could bring this up for you. There is another section of that of future land use. In 6.3 of the commercial land use, it does also say that large commercial development is unlikely to occur in areas outside of municipalities in Pennington County. The unavailability of central sewer greatly limits kinds of commercial development. The larger and big box retailers must have adequate water and sewer in order to develop. This is lacking except within the towns and municipalities of Pennington County. It is more likely that future commercial development that will take place in the unincorporated areas will be smaller in size. I feel that 20 acres easily rivals the size of municipality zoning in Rapid City. So that's a very large property, 7 to 10 times the size of any commercial property that's out there right now. So I think that's a good point to bring up. The other issue that I have is obviously I'm a landowner. I do have four daughters. I live right in that area. I have had 3 instances with the existing commercial property that is there, 2 of which had to have the police called in for. We mentioned the trespass issue. I was actually the first one to call that in, and I'll give you a little more information on that as we go here. The first complaint that I did make was a illegal fireworks complaint. Somebody was shooting fireworks off in the parking lot, called. Obviously, somebody showed up and told them to stop. Illegal in the National Forest to shoot off fireworks. The second being, it was right in August, had a .30 caliber bullet go through my house, about 3 feet from where my daughter was sleeping at the time. Came through our second floor roof, down our stairwell, hit at the bottom of the stair, and had a .30 caliber bullet, full metal jacket at the bottom of our stairs that we found. Called the police out. It was investigated. The trajectory of the bullet came from the direction of that location. Can't say specifically that that's where it came from, but did come from either the highway or the commercial area in that zone. So obviously that was kind of a scary thing for us. Those are registered with the Pennington County Sheriff's Department. The second being the trespassing issue that had happened. We came home one night. We saw a gentleman wandering around behind one of Bill's sheds. Wondered what was going on with that. He appeared like he was urinating at the time. In the meantime, my wife started up the way. I got our 2 youngest kids out of their car seats and told them to go inside. Headed up there, and my wife indicated that the man was masturbating with his phone out and not urinating. He did not speak English. He was a resident or somebody staying at the hotel there. I escorted him back to the hotel. Obviously, my wife was yelling at him quite profusely. I escorted him back to the hotel and talked to the foreman, who said, call the police if that's what you want to do. And we did. So we called the police. Police came out and investigated. I don't think that they, you know, I don't know exactly what the findings of that were, but they did contact Bill, and Bill chose not to press charges on that. But it just shows, you know, as a concerned homeowner, that I've had 3 issues in less than a year since that opened. A larger commercial development, I think, would bring in many, many more issues that would, you know, break into the quality of my living there and my long-term investment. I realize that's only a perceived investment, but it does, I do feel that commercial property next to that would hurt my long-term.
Any questions for Ryan?
I do just have one other thing that I would like to say. I'm sorry. I found this, and this speaks specifically to the Lot 1 access. If that is pushed, that I think that it falls within what would be considered spot zoning. Spot zoning can be kind of a dangerous thing, but for you that don't know what spot zoning is when comparable properties nearby areas zoned differently, but applicants are receiving favorable zoning classification because they either asked for it or because they are being favored. For example, look around to see if there are other residential streets in residential street is zoned residential, but no good reason someone is asking to have the lot zoned commercial. This would be a stereotype version of spot zoning. Fits it exactly. So that access really, really speaks to the idea that that would open that up to spot zoning. So I thank you guys for listening to us. We appreciate it. I would agree with the sentiments that Bill had passed along, that, you know, the problem with there's not much of a problem with that Lot 2 being commercial, leaving the billboards there. None of us had a problem with that. It was when the access was opened up to Lot 1 that became the issue. Thank you.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have no questions. I would just note that I believe on Friday of last week, Mr. Flick called me and kind of reiterated what was written in the letter in the staff report, and I asked if he was going to be here today to speak, and he said that he was.
I second that. He called and talked to me as well on Friday.
Fine, me too.
And I appreciate you guys taking the time to speak on that. Thank you.
All right. No further questions? Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Any other members like to speak on behalf of this item? Again, I'd kind of like to realize that there's a lot of individuals here. I understand you may be for or against it, but if you're against it, just if you're going to come up here, give us some new information if you don't mind.
We've tried to organize this so everybody is doing that, so you're not repeating the same.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Michael Anderson, and I'm wearing 2 hats also. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Stratmeyer Addition Homeowners Association, and then I am also speaking on my own as an individual. I am one of the people that has property that is against Lot 1 up there. So I'm a little afraid of seeing commercial traffic in that area, because I feel that it's going to affect all of the people that are adjacent to that commercial property. Gotcha. And I'm speaking to Lot 1 when I'm talking about that. Also, as the Secretary Treasurer, we have wells up there that are community wells. And the water that we receive in those wells flows through cracks in the rock. And the rock, geologically, this has all been explained to me. The rock kind of stands on end so that the water has to flow down through these cracks in the rock into our wells. So it doesn't really get filtered very well. It just goes down there. In 2012, I was denied a conventional septic system on my lot because the system would have been too close to the bedrock, these rocks that are flowing down. Never did get one put in there. And so that was one of the reasons they quoted to me. The other reason was that there had been all sorts of septic issues with the motel. with the lodge that's currently there. Now, that isn't right now, but in the past, they'd had many, many septic issues where their own septic was contaminating their own fresh water. So they were having problems there. Several years ago, we sunk a well in the Guthmiller property, which is just north of Lot 1. And we were going to try to supplement our water supply there with another community well. The nitrate level was so high, it was unfit for human consumption. Experts told us that they felt that it was being contaminated by some septic system that was very near that. So that's not very far from that Lot 1 line where we had to abandon that well and walk away from it. Secondly, there's another well that's not far from the entrance to Lot 1 off of Pine Haven Drive. It's a community well that's serving 5 different households in that area. We have noticed in testing there, since the lodge got up and running, that the nitrate level has started to rise in that well. On the last test, which was taken 8/30/2018, the nitrate level was 7.83. 10 is the level that you need to reach in order to make that water unsafe for human consumption. So we're getting really close, and that's 5 households, and we really don't know what our next move is going to be if that level goes above 10. It could be a real problem. So I just wanted to bring those issues up because I feel like even rezoning that Lot 1 to, to low density residential may make a difference in our water quality. But the way I see it is we can't stop progress completely. So if it was rezoned to low density residential, we'll take our chances. I mean, we really don't have much choice. But to zone it commercial, I don't know exactly. First of all, we've never been told what they're going to put in there. But regardless of what they plan to put in there, if they run into all kinds of issues with water and septic, they're probably going to, maybe sell the property off and let somebody else decide what to put in there. And we lose control completely of what goes in there as far as, as far as what usage is going to go in there. At least if it was rezoned low density residential, we'd have a pretty good concept of what's going to go in there. And we'll have to take our chances on that. That's the way I see it.
Any questions for Michael? Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else like to speak on behalf of this item? I'll just remind you to keep it. I'll just remind you to keep it to new information, please.
That one? Is that the one you want?
Yes. Yep. Thank you. Okay, my name is Merv Guthmiller, and I live adjoining the property, and most of my property is right along here. And then Mike Anderson's joins it right here. So there are four residential properties along the 2 legs of this triangle that forms Lot 1. We're talking about 4 properties. The average assessed value of them is $638,000. So they're pretty nice homes, and I like living there like it is. So I think, all I have to talk about is the neighborhood and what it's like, because right now it's maintained well. It's quiet, safe, and secure. And our neighborhood's familiar with people that live there. We're familiar with vehicles that go by. For the most part, we are. So it really helps us for a neighborhood watch to keep it safe and know what's going on there. The we really don't, I mean, we just like it like it is. We don't want it to change, obviously, but we've noticed even when the lodge was opened up, that the only place, excuse me, the only place people really have to walk when they're there is down Pine Haven Drive, unless they walk along Highway 16. So we've had a lot more transient, I would call strangers, walking there, and so that kind of makes it impossible for neighborhood watch to see if there's anything going on there that's not safe and dangerous. So, good thing Mike covered whatever else I had here on the well, so I'm not going to duplicate that. But
Thank you.
it's if you haven't seen the neighborhood, it'd be great if you could see what we have there. It's really a nice place to live, and I can imagine what commercial property would do to that area. It's not a good thing. So,
Any questions?
Any questions for me?
Any questions for Murph?
Quick question.
Go ahead, Gary.
Mr. Guthmiller, so your property is along the northern side of this border.
Yes.
How much property do you have right
4.5 acres.
4.5 acres.
It's kind of a long, narrow lot.
Okay, would it start at where the road district road is at, right there at the corner?
Yeah.
And so it would go how far across there? Is it a fourth of the way across the property that we're talking about?
Across that leg, you mean, of the property? More than a fourth of the way.
More than a fourth? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's narrow,
Over there.
but it's long. Covers
Looks like it
most
goes
of
half at least.
Okay. Okay, I see the line now.
Here's the.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Just remind you, new information only, please.
Do my best. My name is Lon Beener. I'm a property owner within 500 feet of the subject property, and I'd like to briefly talk about the potential use of the subject property. And to do that, I want to give you just a little bit of history. I moved into this area in 2003. At that point in time, the Rockerville Motel was operating in Rockerville. The commercial property, which is now the lodge, was an assisted living facility. The Gaslight was there in downtown. The old tourist Rockerville was vacant and decaying. By 2006, Rockerville Motel in downtown Rockerville closed and was for sale. I believe Pat Hall ended up purchasing that, and he put it on the market. So you've had commercial property that's been for sale in Rockerville since 2006. The assisted living facility, shortly after 2006, closed and was also put on the market. It sat idle for years. Bill gave you the story that we, and I was one of the property owners that forked out some money. What Bill didn't tell you is all of us took a significant financial loss to get that property remarketed. And I will tell you that I personally believe that it was our efforts that resulted in that lodge currently being open today. And that lodge was combined with the old Rushmore Motel into one facility, which is being operated now as the Rockerville Lodge and Cabins. So when we look at the existing properties, I think that that property was a result of our efforts in the neighborhood. And so when I look at what's best for that subject property, when I look at the commercial aspect, there has been no commercial growth. There has been no commercial property survivability. It went from a motel to an assisted living to vacant to now I am thankful that it has been renovated and is up and running. I hope they can make it. I will tell you this, they told me when I went down there, when they first opened up, that they wanted to run year round. Well, they didn't last the first winter, so I'm hopeful still that it will continue to be. If not, we're going to continue to have more commercial property in the Rockerville area that's not being developed. Now, if you can compare that with what has happened in our neighborhood, I was the president of our homeowners association for quite a few years from the 2003 timeframe on. I personally was involved with the approval of the construction of homes. Today, almost all of that has been developed. Right now today, there are no existing homes on the market. Right now today, there are no undeveloped lots on the market. 2 undeveloped lots became on the market within the last couple of years and have sold. And there's plans to go ahead and develop those. So we're to the point now that although we've had development of every 2-3 years, a house being developed, there isn't going to be much more because there isn't any left. So when I look at what should be done with that subject property, the growth has been in the low density residential. The stagnation, the lack of growth, the issues that we've had with regard to the community have been with the commercial property. So I commend the county, whoever was involved when they put together the comprehensive plan and said that should be low density residential, because history and the trends tell me that that was the correct decision. So I encourage you to stick with the plan that you put in place, because commercial just does not fit that subject property with what we have seen in the past and what's likely to occur in the future. Thank you.
Any questions for Lon? All right, thank you very much. Any other members from the audience like to speak on this item?
My name is Arlen Stratmeyer, and I built those roads. Well, what I mean is I didn't hire it done. I actually did it myself when I developed that. And I was running the road grader, and I wondered what it was going to be like. I really didn't know what this development was going to be like. And I thought, well, I want to live in here, because I do live in the back. And I thought, I bet you a lot of retired people are going to live out here. Well, I'm now 62 years old, so I'm readily approaching that qualification. But I thought, well, you know, what's going to really happen? And as I was running that road grader, I envisioned 2 old people, whatever that is in your mind, and they were riding bicycles toward me. Well, you know, you understand what I'm trying to tell you. I didn't know what was going to happen out there. But I wanted a quiet neighborhood, a real nice neighborhood. Well, as it turned out, that's what we got. Only it was a little different. There are far more families with small children than I thought. So at any given day, especially in the summertime, what I note is a lot of people with their little children riding their bikes beside them, pushing the carriage, mothers pushing carriages. And of course, it isn't just young people walking the road. We've got old guys in fancy jogging suits that are just, sorry, Merv. But anyway, I tell you, it's a very quiet neighborhood, and I'm happy that it did turn out that way. It isn't the exact demographic I had in mind, but it's okay, you know. And I just want to say, from a safety point of view, there are a lot of people walking on that road, and I would hate to see a lot of traffic coming from tourists, whatever it might be for commercial property, I don't know, but commercial property is going to generate a lot of traffic, and that's a safety concern for me. So I don't want to take up your time, but I'm glad we got that development, and it's nice there. Thank you.
Any questions for Arlen? Thank you, sir. Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item?
How many more are there?
I'm just going to ask you to bring up only new information, please.
I'm going to try to do that. My name's Dan McGuire. I am sitting I have 2 lots. I have 9.91 acres. Other than Arlen and the Breakfasts, I believe I'm the oldest person out there. We built our home in 1996. There were 3 of us out there. There are now 26 homes in this development. My wife walks that road every day. She takes her dog for there. You know, trespass issues. I have 2 lots, and one I have built a road. We were going to build a new home We've chosen not to do that, but my road is in. I had to acquire an approach permit from, and put it into specs. I didn't get any engineering things waived or anything like that to, when I put that approach in. We have had traffic from the lodge, tried to go onto our road. The Rockerville Flume Trail is directly behind the end of our development. My land borders the Forest Service, and right above me is the Flume Trail. And so we've had people walking, and my wife has stopped them. I have since put up no trespassing signs to try to alleviate that from going. I allow any of my people in the neighborhood to access it and utilize it. This is a residential neighborhood. The lodge was there before the development was ever built. So that's why it's there. That was the first thing that was put in. I am one of the people who contributed to try to salvage it, make it into something better. It was the big green monster. It actually was slated. We were going to have the Rockville Fire Department burn it to the ground and take the hit. We fortunately found somebody that was willing to put some money in. All I can say is that is not, that area is not commercial. Rockerville has had a for sale sign in it ever since since 1996. There's all kinds of commercial land down there for sale, and not one fraction of it has ever even sold. So I'm not, like I say, we have no idea what is going in there, and that's the scary part. And so, I just adamantly opposed to it. Totally in agreement with the low-density residential. It's a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood, great neighbors, have no desire to move. So I just ask that you not approve this.
Thank you. Any questions for? Did I hear you say Don?
One question.
Oh, go ahead, sir, Gary.
Dan, on your second lot then, is that something that you would remarket, or is that, have you just come up with that?
Believe you, I tried, but my wife won't let me.
Oh, okay.
So I have my house sits on 3.4 acres, and the balance of the 9.91 is the other lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan? Thank you. Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Just a reminder, only new, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tyler Stratmeyer. I grew up here. I was there before any of that was developed. We owned that motel. And that's my childhood backyard, and I just care deeply about it. So I just wanted to go on the record just saying that I agree with all the points that have been brought up today, and I thank you for consideration.
Thank you. Any questions for Tyler? Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item?
Hi, my name is Lana Breckus, and my husband and I live at the end of Earl Court, across from Michael Anderson and his wife Morella. And it is such a quiet neighborhood, but I do want to say that since the motel has opened, you have to understand, excuse me, I've had a shoulder issue, but you turn onto Pine Haven Drive, curve around, it's a nice little curving road, and then you get to Earl Court. You curve around, and it's a cul-de-sac, okay? There's no outlet from where we live. Since the motel opened, traffic has increased where people think they can come around and make the loop and get back on Highway 16. And they have to come back, go around the cul-de-sac and then back out again. I can only imagine what would happen with general commercial being there. That said, we have concerns about traffic. The water situation is critical. The septic situation is even more critical. And lastly, it has fallen to me to ask you all a question. You are all in business, have been in business. Since we are so adamantly opposed, we want to ask on the record, have any of you ever had business with Mr. Pankratz or Nash or whatever that would affect your vote on this, or any personal relationship?
Any questions?
That's all we want
Yeah,
to do.
we would have to announce that and abstain from voting if we were to have had personal relationships or any type of arrangement with him.
Okay, I was unaware of that.
Yes.
But they asked that the question be asked, and I appreciate your candor, and we would really appreciate your consideration. Low density is the way to go on this, and sticking with the comprehensive plan, and we really appreciate your consideration, and thank you.
Any questions for Lena? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any further members of the audience?
Good morning. My name is Rod Christensen, and my wife and I, Penny, recently bought that property we live at. And one of the biggest reasons is because it was a nice, quiet neighborhood, and I have no problem with the low density either, but the commercial thing, I think, would ruin what we have now. So I hope that you consider all that we've said and not change that zoning to that commercial. Thank you.
Any questions for Rod? Thank you very much. Any further comments on this item? All right, seeing none. Are there any questions that any of the membership would like to ask any staff or anyone?
Mr. Chair, I just have some questions. I'm not sure. So, why was access, so the Department of Transportation didn't allow access off of the section line either, is that correct?
I'm not sure if that was asked. Was that off of the section line? Off of 16?
Okay.
I don't know if they
And
asked
then
for.
could you speak to the approach permit that the first gentleman that spoke about, Bill, coming off of Pine Haven? If they're the road district, then they have the authority to either grant or deny that access. Is that a correct statement?
The approach permit, they can, I guess, grant or deny it. The way that we look at it with this is that was platted as a public right-of-way within the road district. I haven't looked at the specific road districts. Every road district is set up different in their bylaws, and what they govern and what they use for maintenance and stuff is different from road district to road district.
Can I follow up with that, Rich, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
Coming off of 16 to get to that access point, though, is not along the right-of-way, though. So who can they deny access through from 16 along Pine Haven Road before they get up there to that entrance?
I mean, who deny access?
The road district, whoever owns the road district.
Off of Pine Haven or off of 16?
So
anything off of 16 would be DOT.
right.
South
So
Dakota
what I'm
DOT.
saying from 16 along Pine Haven before you get to the actual point of entry for that piece of property on that northwest corner, who controls that?
The road district.
The road district. And can they deny access through that portion to get up to that entry point?
I don't know that. That'd probably be a legal question.
Michelle, do you? Do you know what I'm asking?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. Well, first of all, I think it would be important for legal to be able to clarify the history concerning the road district as well as easements, public right-of-ways, because as this commission is aware, any legal opinion is very much dependent on the facts. Also, legal would need the opportunity to look at the laws involving the access permit as well as the laws that relate to access of public right-of-way. I don't believe that the road district would have any authority to prevent access to a public right-of-way. So unfortunately, I can't give you, I think the question you're looking for is that little portion, who has authority over that little portion, whether the road district can deny access, and I would need an opportunity to look at the facts and do a little research to answer that question.
I guess maybe not that little piece, and I understand if you still need to do some research. I'm not really looking for that little piece of access, because I understand if that's public access right away, if they can get to that point, they can access it. I'm talking about from 16 to that point.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. I don't have any information or knowledge as to, my information is the same that you've received today. So I would really need to be able to take a closer look at who has authority over that little sliver and how South Dakota codified law would apply to this particular situation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Michelle? Thank you.
But I would say it's a good question, and if it's a question that this commission feels needs to be answered before they're able to render a decision, that perhaps this matter is best continued in order for us to answer that question.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any further questions? Any other clarification that someone would like clarified before? Current recommendation is to approve the rezone 1812 and comprehensive plan amendment CA 1811. I'm of the mindset I'd like to find out more about that road district issue. Just that's my opinion, but so I would like to see this continued, but I'm not the one who makes the final determination on it. It's the whole board. Is there any?
I would like to make a motion to deny the request for rezoning.
There's a motion to deny.
I'll second that for discussion.
Seconded by Rich for discussion. Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
You know, I support the denial of rezoning the larger lot, Lot 1. I find the evidence pretty compelling that this is low-density residential. And to me, to use the small parcel, I mean, first of all, I agree that the Rockerville site where the gas light is doesn't really apply because it's in a different corridor. It's just completely different. To use the small parcel where that lodge is to justify rezoning this very large parcel, I mean, to me, it's already the tail wagging the dog. And so I don't really see that the issue of access is even an issue because I don't think it should be rezoned commercial. And I'm perfectly okay with rezoning Lot 2 for the billboards to be commercial, and that makes perfect sense, and there's no reason not to. But I don't know how, since this recommendation is the rezone of both of them general commercial, I don't know if we need to deny it and then you need to come back with a mixed, a request for mixed rezoning or different rezoning. I don't really know how that works, but I really can't support rezoning this larger parcel as commercial.
Any further comments, further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I guess that would be a question, I think, for staff. How do we, is it appropriate to split a recommendation, if you will?
All right, BJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. I would recommend then, if you want, denial without prejudice, which give them opportunity to come back with something new. Also keep in mind a denial actually pretty much nullifies the approved plat.
Explain.
Thank you.
Explain that further.
Well, the plat was approved for these lot sizes. They're at the preliminary plat stage, and they basically have an administrative level next, which is the final plat. They've already gone for a lot size variance, which was denied. So an opportunity for a rezone is their only option. So even if you were to rezone that front portion, that's part of the plat. They have no option. It doesn't matter. It's kind of the vote won't mean anything.
But
we kind of got to start over. But a denial without prejudice can keep those wheels turning with some adjustments.
But the billboards are there legally now, are they not?
All part of one big lot. They're not their own lot right now. Right?
Yes, yeah, but I mean, they are already allowed to be a billboard and you wouldn't necessarily need to rezone Lot 2 to allow them to continue to be a billboard, would you?
If they didn't want to change anything.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for PJ?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
I would offer a substitute motion to deny without prejudice.
There's a substitute motion to deny without prejudice.
Second.
And there's a second by Sonny. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much. I believe that takes us to item number, that was item 6, right? Takes us to item number 7.
Hello again. Item number 7 is construction permit 1810 to grade in order to flatten an area to receive 4 inches of gravel for a new parking lot. The property in question right now is what is considered the Black Hills Speedway. The existing conditions on the lot, it is zoned general commercial district. It's 34.07 acres. There is also a Black Hills Speedway cart track. The utilities are provided by the Rapid Valley Sanitary District. And a majority of this property is dedicated as a public drainage easement. And just a little history, so just some definitions here for the record. The American Planning Association defines a drainage easement as land in which the public, the city, or the county has an easement devoted to, planned, proposed, or required for the uses for the public drainage system. This public drainage easement was dated December 5th, 1983, and it was prepared by Davis Engineering and Surveying. Shows a majority of the subject property was granted, bargained, and conveyed as a perpetual drainage easement over, on, and across the hereinafter described tract of real estate situated in the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter and the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter, Section 10, Township 1 North, Range 8 East. Previous requests on this property were layout plats through the city of Rapid City. One item to keep in mind is that the applicant acknowledged the drainage improvements to the racetrack drainage draw basin may be necessary in order for the plat to be approved as proposed. This layout plat was denied without prejudice because of the drainage issues and then location, approach, and subdivision layout issues. And then again in 2009, there was a request for a construction permit. And again, there was concerns over the drainage. Comments from the city of Rapid City regarding this was the property has been developed to serve as a detention facility for the racetrack drainage basin. This has been a commonality throughout the history of this property's requests. Again, in 2015, the property came in and got a construction permit to grade and level some stockpiles. Again, the drainage issues were of concern, and this was ultimately approved by the Planning Commission with 13 conditions, although some of the conditions still to date have not been met. Again, after that construction was done, they constructed a cart track to the north of the property within the public drainage easement, which was not approved by the Board of Commissioners as required as Condition 8. Condition 8 stated that any alterations or improvements to the public drainage easement be engineered and stamp plans be submitted and approved by the Board of Commissioners. During testimony in May of 2016, the only discussion was about replacing a pipe, not any changes to the actual drainage easement. I guess what brings this kind of to light and what staff is asking for direction from the Planning Commission on this is last summer, with the heavy rains and things like that, we received complaints regarding in this drainage basin, flooding basements, ditches flooding, things like that. So staff does have some concern about any more alteration to this property because it is secured as a public drainage easement and the future of what we need to see done in this drainage basin. Like I said, in 1983, it was secured as a public drainage easement, and I think in talking to other people in history on this property, most of the development that is occurring north is, with the understanding that this is a public drainage easement, that this is a detention facility at some point. There's a lot of history in here. But the request is to do some grading and drainage, or grading changes to the south portion of the property. I did talk to DOT again on Friday, and they do have concern about adding more flow to their roadway ditch. And as of Friday, and talking to them, the comments and concerns that they had with this request had still not been addressed with them.
All right. Any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I've got this right in my head, that the drainage issues associated with the detention pond, let's say, and the outlets, that's, let's say, one thing. And then the drainage issue associated with this area that they want to to grade and to gravel and so on, that drainage goes then south to that ditch along the road, is that right? It doesn't go into the basin for the detention pond, is that right?
They both go to the same place. They both go to the Highway 44 road ditch.
Okay, so the box culvert, so the discussion here of the box culvert, I mean, I guess maybe that's where I want to make sure that I have this right in my head, is that the box culvert catches the drainage from this ditch, as well as the drainage from the culvert coming out of the detention pond?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
And so the issue here is that it's not the box culvert that's undersized for the flow, it's this ditch that's not large enough, is that right?
Or the detention facility is not detaining long enough, the flows are too much for the rest of the, because what's happening is it's coming down across here, and then it hits the Murphy ditch. The Murphy ditch intercept. No, that's actually the road ditch.
Yeah, so but this new area they want to work on, how does that affect, what effect does that have on the detention pond and the releases and so on? And maybe you know, Rich.
I understand it to be downstream. So you have the detention pond upstream. The area they want to grade is south of that. So it's outside of the detention pond area. Is that not correct? Did I misunderstand that?
That is.
Okay.
But over the course of the years, we've had continued issues with drainage. And last summer, it seemed, so we really don't know what all of these alterations and changes over the years have actually really done.
Have done to that retention pond.
Just to the drainage basin in general. To the drainage basin.
Yes, but I mean, this particular request to just flatten this area and to receive new gravel, that's downstream of the detention pond, so it really only affects this road ditch. That's where the flow goes, or the storm runoff. And so it really, it's independent. I'm not arguing at all that there needs to be a relook at that detention pond and so on. But this work here won't affect that.
I don't know that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, if they've readjusted the topography or anything there.
But I think it's meant to flow to the south, not to the north into the pond, but that's
right. And I know that DOT did have some concerns. If you look on the comments of page 14, and those have not been addressed by the applicant, to my knowledge, as far as Friday when I spoke to Mike Carlson at DOT.
And the additional comments you said?
Yep.
Okay, so this comment is that the increased flows that would come from this area, that's what is, they're not allowing that.
That's what their concerns are addressing, okay. Yes.
So the real trick then would be for this request to document, one, that it doesn't, either it doesn't increase the flow because it's gravel and it'll infiltrate, or if it does increase the flow, then they have to have some sort of a detention collection agents, detention pond or other controls. Okay, very good.
Any further questions? You got something?
Go ahead, I have some questions. I guess really they're along the lines of what's the holdup on the resolution of the violations that are currently in?
If you look at, I believe it is page 20, we have met with the applicants on several occasions. And on November 9th, 2018, item S there, it says staff from, Commissioner LaCroix, staff from the State's Attorney's Office, Planning Department, Highway Department met with the landowners and agent, Ron Davis of Davis Engineering, to discuss the issues on the property. And then they went away with coming back to us. Nothing has been resolved with it. There was a request emailed to the planning director asking for this to be put on your agenda.
Even though they haven't complied with the requests.
We haven't come to a...
I see.
I'm of the opinion that they should come in compliance before moving forward.
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Richard.
Chair, was there a drainage report submitted with the requested work that, I guess, addressed the Department of Transportation's concerns about increasing the runoff?
There was nothing. The only thing that we received, this was what we received in 2015. And then the plans that you guys received in, here are the grading plans.
So at this point, they want to put down some gravel and flatten out the area, and really haven't addressed any of the other concerns that have been brought up by staff, the Department of Transportation, or anybody else. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct, and it kind of
I
historically has gone back since the layout plat request in 2000, I think.
Okay.
2001.
I have no further questions.
Anybody else have any further questions for this particular item?
No questions. I had the same concerns.
Fair enough. Well, currently staff is looking for direction on this from the Planning Commission on how to proceed. I'm of the mindset of denying it until the other issues are addressed, unless Planning Commission staff has a recommendation at least.
I just don't want you to forget the applicant and landowners are here. You might want to talk with them.
Fair enough, yep. Just making sure that no one else has any questions. All right, would the applicant like to come forward?
I'm Ron Davis, Davis Engineering. Applicants are here also. There are a ton of drainage issue problems out here. It has been for years, okay? What we're trying to do does not resolve those drainage issues, but what we are doing does not affect the drainage at the south end of the track. We're just going to clean it up and put some gravel. We're not changing the elevations, not changing the cross section. The flow will be exactly the same. We're not doing a thing except leveling it off and putting some gravel down. That's all we're doing. I did verbally talk to the DOT and told them the same thing, explained it to them. They said, fine, just send us a letter on it or something. Well, I forgot to do that. Okay, I didn't do that. But we're not affecting the overall drainage basin. This is a major problem, and it has been for a long time. Years ago, we had a Western Dakota Water District. I guess they're still, I just found out they're still in place, but we had a drainage fee system set up where we could design a basin. We had fees to solve those problems. The people in this drainage basin voted to do away with that. So that's gone. There's no funds to solve this problem. This racetrack owner should not have to solve the problems of everybody clear to the interstate. That's a major area that drains into here. He shouldn't be responsible to do that whole thing. There should be some funds from the county, federal funds or something come up to solve this problem, okay? So we're working on that. We actually flew this area not too long ago. We've developed a topo. We're reshooting some of the detention cells that were designed by Ferber Engineering north of the track. We don't think they were built correctly. They're smaller than they should be. So we're shooting that and we're checking all that information. We're going to come up with a drainage plan to solve the problem. Problem is there's no funds to do that. Okay, so that's a whole nother issue, and we're working on that. What we're trying to do now is just clean up the south end of this track. There's been weeds, and it's just a mess out there. So they're trying to clean it up, make it look good, and that's all we want to do is pave that and make that work out there so it looks better, clean it all up. The issues with the go-kart track and all that, those are some issues that we think we have the answers to some of that. Some of the county staff don't quite remember what they said at certain meetings, but there was no documentation. The state's attorney gal, I don't remember her name, she says she does remember that discussion at those meetings. She doesn't remember exactly what was said. So there's a lot of things that need to be resolved with that type of thing too. But we are working on it. We're trying to work on that. So all we're asking for now is a permit to just grade this area, clean it up, and it will not change the flow into the road ditch. It'll actually, I didn't do the calculations like a report, I could do that, but because of what's there now, it's a smooth surface and a dirt surface, and the water will run off faster for that 200 feet from the end of the track. It's coming off of there faster now than it will when the gravel is on there. It'll actually slow down. The only thing I didn't show on my grading plan was wattles or silt protection along the fence. We are going to do that and put that in. So all we're asking for is a permit to put the 4 inches of gravel down and clean that into the track up. The other issues are still there, and we're going to continue working on them. But
any questions for Ron?
What's the schedule for resolving the ordinance violations?
I don't know what, if you don't think we have a meeting yet set up to do that, do we? Don't have anything yet?
That's correct. There's no meeting set up. They went away from that earlier meeting in November with the understanding, per their request, that they were going to talk about it and come back to us with some ideas. We never heard anything. All they asked is that they be put on for a hearing, so that's why we're here today. So they never offered any solutions.
I think when we left that meeting, the county was going to get a hold of the city, and we were going to work together to try to get a meeting put together, and I've never heard anything on the county meeting with the city or anything being brought up about that. So we do need to get a meeting set up. Because of the violation, they wouldn't even talk to us for a while. They turned it over to the county attorney and all that. They wouldn't even talk to us. We're in trying to resolve the issues, and they just shut us off. We couldn't talk to them.
When you say they, are you talking about city?
The county.
County wouldn't do it?
Yeah, PJ and the county, they wouldn't let us come back because they were in violation, so they turned it over to the attorney. We had to get a hold of her and get permission to set up a meeting to talk to the county and try to resolve some of this, which we did.
Can I ask you a question about that? Did you already talk to your attorney at that point?
At what point?
Whenever when the planning office decided they couldn't talk with you, had you already consulted with an attorney?
We didn't talk to an attorney, our attorney or any attorneys for us. It was the state's or the county. Is the county attorney? Is that who she is?
No, the minute you got an attorney involved, we send it up to state's attorney and we stopped working. And then that's why the state's attorney was involved with the commissioner in that meeting at that time, because they did get an attorney involved. And then we were directed to kind of work on it with them, and that's what we were waiting for. So the minute an applicant gets attorney involved, we get our attorneys involved.
And that's standard?
That's standard.
Yeah, because...
And the owners did not get an attorney involved. They just had their attorney call down here and ask a question.
That gets the attorney. That gets the attorney involved.
Okay, I don't know how you interpret that, if it's involved or not.
Sorry, I'd like to clarify that. I actually got a written letter and an email from the attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany.
Okay.
When an attorney does contact that's getting an attorney involved, and at that point, it gets to be between the attorneys just having those discussions. So.
Okay. I'm not an attorney, so I don't understand this.
Fair enough. Any questions for Ron? Ron, did I get your name right?
Ron
okay.
Davis, yeah. The owners are here. They may have a thing to say too.
Okay, but you're here, and there's questions for you.
Just one really small point. You said a few minutes ago we used the word paving, but I don't know if you meant to say
no paving. It's just a gravel surface.
Gravel only. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay, thank you.
Just be a gravel surface. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Ron? Seeing none. All right.
Thanks.
Any other members of the audience like to speak on this item? The owners.
Hi, everybody. My name's Eddie Kirchhoff. My father and I, our family, is bought the Speedway in 2010. I've owned it ever since. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to talk to us. Obviously, this is an ongoing issue with the Speedway. Many, many years. A lot of history has been presented within the slides that was presented by the Planning Commission. We did our best to familiarize ourselves with the information given to us on Friday is when I was able to receive it, the whole packet and everything. So after going through it, there are some gaps missing. One of them would be when we applied for our permit CP 15-10, which is the permit that Brittany is referring to for the violations. We sat down and had a meeting with PJ, Brittany, and Kinsley Groot. She's I'm not sure if I said her name right, but her last name, but she was a state attorney representative for the state. Towards the tail end of that meeting, we were going over our stockpiles, leveling everything out. Towards the north end of the track, we had some stockpiles set up, and our plan was to level everything out, get it all set up. And at the end of the meeting, we'd asked, and PJ, Brittany, and Kinsley, if it would be okay for us to when we're done flattening out, set up some hay bales and let some kids be able to race in a controlled environment, somewhere safe for kids to race go-karts, bring up the future of racing, that kind of deal. PJ said he didn't see an issue with that. We asked again, he said he didn't see an issue with that. The only reason I bring this up is because this seems to be the spearhead for this whole compliance, non-conforming issue that has been brought up. I spoke with Kinsley Groot on Friday. She remembers us discussing the go-kart track. She doesn't remember the specifics, but she does remember us discussing it. So neither PJ or Brittany seem to remember that conversation taking place. From that point is when we went out there, set up hay bales, finished leveling the ground, and we didn't even start the track, I think, until the end of the year. It was just kind of a side project, you know, somewhere for the kids to race is really what it boiled down to. So during this, there's been, I believe, the 42-inch culverts that have been installed. One's in the pond, one's where the go-kart track is, and there's another one at the north end of the track. That actually feeds all this water into the speedway. And I know this because there's been fish swimming along the backside of the track, which come from the pond. So obviously, so when we get the big rainstorms, everything comes in, the track fills up. I think they had a picture of one. I'm not sure how to work that, but I've got a few pictures here of the track completely flooded. We got a 2-foot by 4-foot barrier the whole around the inside of the track. It floods it up past that point to where, I mean, we can't do nothing. We just have to wait for it to drain out. So I've asked for kind of the documentation, because this is I guess Ron did do a drainage easement study on it in 1983, I believe is when it was. When he did that, I believe any alterations to that should have been brought, you know, the same kind of process we're going through now. Well, those culverts were installed by the water board, I believe is what Ron had said, and we can't seem to find any information on that. It's like the project started but didn't finish. So now we got a 42-inch feeding a 12-inch, which obviously fills up everything in the track, and then it meters out. Everything we've done has been in compliance. We asked permission for this go-kart track originally. We would have never done it if we hadn't received, you know, authorization saying, yeah, we don't see a problem with that, because it wasn't affecting anybody, shouldn't hurt anybody. But that seems to be kind of the spearhead for this whole situation. So I'm not sure if any of you have been out there recently, but we have NBC Sports has been there the past couple of years during the rally for the National Flat Track Race. So we're trying to do our best to make it look the way the Speedway should look. I mean, we take pride in what we do. We love racing. That's why we're involved in a Speedway. I mean, it's what we do. So we just would like to clean up the weed problem. We get complaints about weeds, and we don't like them either. Trying to put in a retaining wall around the corner of the track there, put up a nice fence. I mean, change the appearance from the track, you know, from the Highway 44 that people are proud to drive by and say, yeah, you know, we're part of that. So I guess that's kind of my spiel. And do you have
any questions for Eddie?
I don't have any questions. I guess just a few comments. I'm really not opposed to the gravel or trying to flatten out the area down there. My concern is the open violations that are there. And in order to, move forward with something like this, I'd like some sort of schedule or understanding of when the conditional use permit for the go-kart track and the dirt work exceeding 10,000 square feet and some of those other things can be resolved by you and the engineer, Ron Davis. So, and then, if I understood the documents correctly, the racetrack itself was always is platted and supposed to be a detention pond, correct? Like that's what it's historical.
That's.
answer that question?
Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
Ron Davis again. Is this one? Okay. We platted this, we did some platting for a mobile home park over here when Bill Davies had the track back in the 80s. And part of that agreement to get that done was to make that a detention, do something with the drainage at that time. So we left that as a drainage easement rather than him spending $2 million to solve the drainage problem at that time. But that was platted as an easement, but it is not a detention cell. It was never designed as a detention cell. It was never mentioned as a detention cell, never required to be a detention cell. But it functions like a detention cell because there's a 15-inch pipe or 12-inch pipe, whatever it is. It's 12-inch coming out through the south end of the track. So the track fills full of water, and then that meters out at about 6-7 CFS. So it is not a detention cell. It is a drainage easement that allows water to run through there. We can't block it off or anything like that. So, but it is not a detention cell.
Does that answer your question, Rich?
It does. When do you intend to, I guess, resolve the three, it looks like there's 3 open violations on the property, the grass in excess of 18 inches, conditional use permit needed, and then the dirt work exceeding 10,000 square feet?
The grass is kind of
Taking care of itself.
Yeah, that's kind of our intention. Like I said, the go-kart track, that was okayed prior to, and it's literally hay bales. That's all it is.
Say that again about the go-kart track.
The go-kart track, when we sat down and had a meeting with PJ, Brittany, and Kinsley, we discussed it. They gave us the okay. They didn't see a problem with it, is what they said.
Right, but you said hay bales, is that correct?
There's hay bales, yep.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I see from this picture, and maybe you can both answer that for me. I see tires around it. I don't see hay bales.
They're covered up by the tarps.
There's a picture on 16 of 21.
I'd have to see on the picture.
It's May, April 2018 photo.
Yeah, all those, the majority of the tires we've moved up on the hill.
So current. So that picture that I'm looking at here is not a current picture of that.
The picture you have in your staff report is from May, April 2018.
Have y'all looked at it since then, PJ? Have they moved all that stuff out of there and they only put hay bales out there?
I do not know. I'd like to clarify, though, through discussions with staff and going back through some handwritten notes, there was a discussion about having kids come on go-karts, but there's never been a discussion for a new track. So for a new track. So there may have been some miscommunication there, but there's never been a discussion to add a new track.
Okay.
When I say hay bales, I mean that there was hay bales set in a circle to contain the kids so they have somewhere safe to run into.
Yeah, but even that picture I see in May, I don't.
The hay bales are covered with old tarps, the perimeter of the track.
So those black and white lines.
Oh, those black and white lines.
Covered up,
They're
okay.
little 1-foot hay bales, yeah. And there probably are some tires still sitting there. That's just the very end of the track, but there are hay bales.
How large is that track?
I would have to walk it to tell you. I have no idea.
Roughly. Quarter mile all the way around?
Not even close.
I think your big track's quarter mile, right?
It's whatever we had to work with in the area. Yeah, it's.
Big truck's a half. Big truck's a half mile, I think.
Oh, it's a half mile for the big track. The big track's a half mile track?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I've got some pictures I can bring to you guys. Can I do that? No?
Sure.
Okay.
If you look at that, that's a half-mile track, and that go-kart track is up in between those two dark spots.
These are the same.
It's on the north end between those two dark spots. That's pretty tiny.
Right. Still built without following the ordinances.
Thank you. Thank you.
You pass these out for, what are you going to let us know about these?
Yeah, the first picture I passed out is when the water comes into the track, it fills up. Those are the blocks you see there are 2 foot high by 4 foot wide. And that's the center of the track is just to the left of the bottom of the scoreboard there. So it fills up the entire facility.
When it gets that full, how long does it take to drain out?
I guess it just depends on the storm and how long, if it keeps raining. I mean, days.
So it can be there, it can be full for a few
Yeah,
days.
which sometimes, you know, when we have events, it kind of puts a kibosh on what we're doing for that weekend, which, you know, it is what it is. All that water, though, silts all the dirt silts to the end where that 12-inch, so we've got a pile bigger than the size of that go-kart track that we've had to clean out just this season, that we have to maintain to continually clean that out, because you know how it is. I mean, it's dirt, there's water flowing, and it flows very, very fast. So, I mean, we've been running the expense of trying to keep that clean. I mean, in the end, it's got to function. We understand that, but we're just trying to maintain what we're doing. And if you take a look at that second picture I passed out to you, the track actually used to go out all the way to Highway 44. It used to be very big. So it was a 5/8 at one time, and it was converted down. I believe the corner where we're talking, where the pond is, there was a racetrack there where this go-kart track is. That was racetrack. So originally this whole thing was a racetrack. So it's been shortened up and walls have been put up, but it's always been a racetrack. That's all it's ever been. And by setting up hay bales for children to race in a controlled environment, that was just our intent for somewhere safe. So I don't know. That's kind of all I got.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I just have one question. Do you know the year this photo was taken?
I believe it was in 53, is what my source told me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions?
I'll just
ahead,
acknowledge that
Sonny.
obviously there's a lot of issues here, but the purpose of this construction permit, I don't have a problem with. I think it would be a good thing ultimately. It's going to probably help with the dust issue as well. So, I mean, I'd just like to say that despite all the issues that need to be taken care of, and you'll go ahead and take care of them, I would be supportive of allowing them to do at least this little bit of work here.
Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Rich.
I just have a question, I think, for staff. Normally when you're, and I agree going from dirt to gravel is probably not a big issue, but when you make an improvement like this, isn't there a report that has to be submitted? Drainage report that has to be submitted when you're making modifications to the property? Isn't that part of the county's drainage requirements?
It is, and what we've gotten is a grading plan, and, oops. We've got no verification that it meets it. We've had testimony that says that it's 5 to 6 CFS coming out, but we've never received any information, any data, any metered information that verifies that. Or any changes to the drainage plan. The only changes to the drainage plan were done in 2001 and 2, and that was for the north portion for those detention cells that were constructed.
Does that answer your question, Rich?
But it's required. Is it required or is it not required in the county drainage requirements?
As far as what our drainage plan is?
Someone comes in and they want to change the area on a property that can ultimately change the drainage. Do they have to review that?
That has been the request, and that hasn't been done that I know of. Like I said, this is all that we've gotten. This last year, we really saw lots of changes in the drainage, and we were receiving complaints. I know that there's been, but it hasn't been looked at, I don't think, for a very long time. Our feeling is it is a public drainage easement. It is, staff's responsibility to notify you guys and let you guys know that there are issues out there and that they need to, be remedied at some point.
I'm getting confused. So they are complying with all of the requests, or they are not complying with all of the requests?
We didn't get any information. All I told you is we've gotten these stamp plans, and that's it. We didn't get any information from a drainage plan showing any of these alterations. it's been said in meetings, but there's no engineering document or anything like that that has given us, and the board has never been submitted with that information either.
Got the answer.
All right, any further questions?
Well, I've got just a basic question for Mr. Kershaw. So we've talked about the issues of non-compliance. Is there a problem with bringing those into compliance?
Generally, no, there would not be a problem with it. The go-kart track, I guess, is what it's become known. What we can do is move the hay bales, and it doesn't exist. I mean, it's gone. It's that easy. It's not a non-compliance issue. If it was an issue when we had that original conversation, I believe that's kind of like the main problem, is what I'm sensing, is that the go-kart track, and then that becomes non-compliance, and that's where all the stems from. But we can move hay bales, and it's just land again. That's really the only difference. So that can be done in a matter of an afternoon, if that's the case. So if they don't want to have, what they originally said is have the kids somewhere safe to race. If they don't want that, that's fine. We can remove it. It's just not sure where we need to go with it. So.
Okay.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. With regard to the go-kart, I will represent to the board. I was not present during earlier commissions between Ms. Groot, the applicant, as well as Planning and Zoning. However, and Brittany or PJ may correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that the discussion centered just around, do you have a problem if a couple kids come out there and run their go-karts? Not that there would in fact be a new track. With that being said, the presence of that track now begs the question of whether that go-kart track has expanded the legal non-conforming use. The existing racetrack has been legal non-conforming use for several years. However, the law is very clear that you lose that status once you expand that use. So there is very much a question as to whether an expansion has occurred in this instance. Again, I've just, along with Commission, read the current report, and that's a question that immediately jumped to my mind, is whether in fact there has been expansion in this instance. And I would of course need to have the opportunity to research that, but that is a question that is begged by the facts of this application. And also whether the expansion of this use has detrimentally impacted the drainage. I think that's a big question in staff's mind. Suddenly we have these complaints, we have this drainage issue, and has some of the work that's gone on out there, whether it's the go-kart, moving of other soils, et cetera, has that negatively impacted drainage downstream?
Michelle, just out of curiosity, I know you got to do some research, but if they don't charge for that, for the kids' track, if they're just out there race around, that would still be considered as expanding the usage?
Again, I'd have to research that issue. I know Ms. Malter used a very apt analogy last week when we were discussing this issue, and that is, my daughter wants to be married. She wants to be married in my backyard. Well, that's a personal use. Of course, I'm going to allow my daughter to have a ceremony and maybe a small gathering for her wedding. That's much different than suddenly having more of a business or allowing as a public forum for weddings. That certainly expands the use. So as if anything, I mean, having a couple kids show up and run their go-karts versus essentially expanding your business. I don't know how many kids are out there. I don't know if they're charging. There's a lot of facts I don't know. But I right now, without doing the research, it's flip of a coin. I'd have to find out exactly what is the nature of that use, and then I'd have to look at the case law. But it does raise a question.
Okay.
I guess an analogy I would present to you is, in any event, that go-kart would probably need some sort of permit, but whether it's expanded the use and whether they've lost their legal nonconforming, I don't know. And legal nonconforming use is very disfavored under the law. The idea is when you have a legal nonconforming, you can continue that use in that particular use, but the idea is eventually that use is discontinued, and that's why you can't expand. to use a very recent issue, the analogy I would make is the Kroll mining application. They have a legal non-conforming use for purposes of excavating aggregate. That does not mean they can then also put in a temporary asphalt batch plant on that location. They would have to get a separate permit. So would that be an expansion or is that a new separate use? And that's a question that would need to be answered.
Okay.
I just wanted to add on to that. During the meeting that we had with the applicants, we offered the opportunity and the reasoning behind requesting a conditional use permit. That number one would be able to allow well, if it's approved, allow the smaller track to remain, but also could cover some of the additional uses that they have expressed to us that they want to add on in the future. And having a conditional use permit can help protect that. Can it go away? Absolutely. But knowing that codified law frowns upon legal nonconforming uses, and the point is to get rid of legal nonconforming uses, the conditional use permit option is their best bet. Knowing what we were told from them for the additional uses that they would like on the property and the smaller tract that was put there.
Any questions for staff? Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Ask Mr. Davis, you know, the discussion we were having, the discussion that we had earlier about are you either in compliance or out of compliance with the requirements of the county draining plan and so on? I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
If you're going to change a major drainage channel, you're going to add a channel, you're going to put fill, you're going to do something like that, you need to do a drainage plan, okay? We're not doing that. We have a level spot that's there now, well, a few little humps in it. We're going to level that out and put some gravel in. We're not changing the cross sections or anything to affect the drainage out there for this construction permit. Simply putting gravel on a flat area. So we're not changing, we don't need a drainage plan to do if we aren't changing the cross sections or something to do with the drainage. That's why we did not submit a drainage report. We would if we were going to change the drainage. In fact, we are working on that. We want to do some platting here, and we are, like I said, we've flown this thing. We're working on it to try to figure out how to solve this drainage problem. We think when we get the solution on how to solve it, we got to figure out how to get it paid for, because the racetracks, like I said, shouldn't have to pay for the whole thing. But we are, as far as I know, we're in compliance because we aren't changing the sections or anything. We're just graveling an area. That's all we're doing. And it's kind of sad to hold that all up because of these other issues. They're going to get resolved somewhere along the line. The racetrack should stay there. It shouldn't go away. But, you know, you apply for a conditional use permit, they can say, no, you can't have a racetrack there anymore. Mm-hmm. They can just shut you down. An owner can be really fearful of that. If they would say, you come in and work with us on a conditional use permit, we guarantee that we will not change this use and we'll allow that racetrack to stay there, there might be some reason to do that. But until then, it's a fearful thing. You know, you're at least you get to stay there now, unless, you know, the legal issues say, no, you changed the non-conforming use because you added the track there. I don't know how they can do that. The track is, the track that they built isn't even, it's just kind of graded flat. They didn't change the grades in there at all. They didn't raise or lower anything. They just kind of leveled an area out and put some bales around it. So it didn't change the drainage conditions up there either, so there's no reason to do a drainage study up there either. So, but what we're asking for is just graveling a parking lot that's not changing the drainage at all in any way.
Any further questions?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Sonny.
Mr. David just answered the question I was going to ask, is that there was no dirt work being done to create this go-kart track. They're just on the ground as it was, just put a barrier around it. Is that all?
They didn't go in and raise the ground or do anything like that. Apparently, I don't know if they take a blade or what they did, but they just went around and leveled it off, you know, just leveled off the existing ground. Mm-hmm. So it looked like a track, kind of shaped it like a track.
Where it says areas of disturbance, top left corner, that's where the go-kart track right now is. As part of our original leveling everything out, that's it. And hay bales have to.
Then I want to follow up the question with PJ about.
Sorry, I'll just show you a picture of that prior. That's what it was prior.
If you go to page 15 of your staff report as well.
So is there, when getting a construction permit having to do with excavations and such, and what is this? Is this part of the go-kart track?
This is where the go-kart track is now. Yeah.
Is this dirt part of the construction of that, or?
I don't know. I did not take this picture.
Okay.
When I met out there, myself and the ordinance enforcement officer met out there with the previous track manager. They were just supposed to level that out because they were getting waste dump or something like that, soil, and they were just going to spread it around.
So this is
That's
probably
what I was
something
told.
unrelated? This
is part of the 2015 construction permit because there was piles like this all over and then up in the other corner.
I think one thing to also consider is that you guys are worried about how this track was constructed. It's use.
Okay.
Doesn't matter if it's paved or not. It's the use. There was an increase in use. Someone was even hired to manage that use, which is, you have the article in your staff reports. The use changed.
Okay, that basically answers what I was trying to get at. When does this construction have to do with the movement of dirt? No, it's about the use. Okay, thank you.
You brought up a good point. Nobody has been hired. Nobody is hired. Nobody gets paid. This is strictly volunteers, parents going out there, and any money that's collected goes to trophies for the end of the year for the kids. That's it. Nobody's getting paid absolutely at all. This is just people enjoying themselves, having fun. So it's not a business. It's not what it's made out to be.
I work with a nonprofit and we have volunteers, and portions of our nonprofit do change its use. So there can be change of use even if you don't pay anybody to do it.
Huh.
I just, because I work in a nonprofit that was a self-administering nonprofit and then moved to a medical, but still all volunteers with it. So you can still have a new use even though you don't pay anyone.
Gotcha. Well, I just kind of alluded it to being a business, and it's not a business at all. So just want to make sure I clear that up is all.
Okay. Any further questions? Discussion? Any thought processes of how to move forward?
On the floor, don't we? Sonny's motion?
Did we have a motion?
No, there was no motion.
I don't remember
there's
a
no
motion being, nope.
Okay.
I know we kind of talked quite a bit and asked some more clarifying questions, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Gary.
It appears to me that this item really needs probably to be continued so that the communication at least can be worked out between the parties involved and the planning department as to the current violations and how they can be clarified and so forth. So, I mean, that's just my thought.
I was along the same lines. I was thinking about it'd be nice to see it continue to the next meeting or next available meeting, depending on how that next meeting looks. But within continuing it, having a meeting between the applicant and the planning commission so that they can go through and see what some of the issues are and see where they can at least come to the discussion and see where they can start working to fix what needs to be fixed versus, and get any clarification questions asked by the planning department. And hopefully work out a compromise to where we can move forward with this, unless somebody else has a different perspective. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I support continuance, but I think that it's important on this one. To me, the most important thing is to respond to the Department of Transportation's issues on the drainage into that ditch into Highway 44. And you said that you've had the discussion, you need to follow up and so on. I think that really is something we need to see, that I would like to see. And, you know, I also, just for the record, will say that I personally had experience with this drainage basin. Now, way far up north, you know, my husband and I has developed a lot of land up there starting in the early 90s. And this drainage basin is a problem. It has been for a very long time. And it costs developers, you know, all the way up to Interstate 90 money to deal with the water that ultimately ends up down here. So I recognize that it is a much bigger issue than just the drainage easement that goes through the racetrack. So I just think it's just got to be important here to try to kind of disaggregate some of these issues. You know, the issue of what you're asking to do in this particular request, graveling that area with a larger drainage issue in this basin, which I understand it's not simple. And then these other issues of compliance and the, you know, change of use. And I just think it's kind of important to keep all these separate as you know, kind of go forward.
I concur with that. There's a lot of things going on here. I think they're all important. But I don't know if we need to hold up the whole thing when just in this case they're looking for one construction permit. Just my perspective.
Any further comments?
I have
ahead,
more questions. I
go
guess.
ahead, Rich.
I'm just looking at the plan, and the plan that was submitted August 17th, 2018 is the proposed plan, correct? There's a large area called Area 2 that appears to have a significant grade change from Area 1. And I don't know how they're going to get there. I'm looking at the contours and wondering, will there be a road that gets there, or how will that?
PJ, could you put that one up on the
like the last page of the report?
Not sure if it's in the PowerPoint. We might be able to pull the staff report up.
Okay. You said it's on the last page there? Oh, the fold out.
Oh, you guys have 11 by 17?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to get a bigger image because I can't see very well. And Rich, where were you talking about specifically on this?
Bottom right-hand side.
Area 2?
Yep. And then my last question is how many cubic yards of material are being proposed to move?
You can use the other microphone if you want.
Yeah, I don't think, I've never calculated it. I've got the amount of base course. I never did calculate the yardage. This isn't going out for bid. It's a private guy doing his own work, so we didn't do the yardage. It's just, but the area to the right, the upper area, we're leveling that off, but that's not within this drainage basin at all. It's up on a hill, it's up on top of a hillside, so we're not getting down into that drainage area as defined down in there. So it's just some additional work we wanted to do to get leveled off to make more parking up there.
Is that material going to be taken off site then, or?
No, it'll be, you see the darker areas, the slope on the east end of it? Or not the east end, you see the dark areas that are, the contour lines are closer together?
Yep.
You got the flat area, then it goes down a slope.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that slope is filled from the dirt from the upper side of the lot. So we're just taking the upper side of the lot, pushing it over and leveling it off and then sloping it down into the existing grade.
Okay, I just didn't see how you were going to get to the flat spot is all.
Just making a flat spot up there is all, yeah.
So it's not going to be used for parking, or is that meant to be used for parking as well?
That could be used for parking, it'll be gravelled.
Okay.
Like the rest of it.
Answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? If not, there's still not a motion on the floor yet, so I would entertain any suggestions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Gary.
I would offer a motion to continue this to the next available meeting so that the parties can clear up with the planning department the violations that currently exist.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Jerry, can we have the date of that meeting?
Yeah, February 11th.
February 11th.
Question on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
I guess I would ask Eddie and JP, is that, or PJ, does that sound like enough time to get together and get these issues worked out?
We actually will be out of town then, so I won't be able to be here for the 11th, but if we can, is there another meeting right after that then?
There's February 25th.
February 25th?
That'd be fine.
Okay. So if we at least had a meeting or continued it to the 25th, would they give them plenty of time to have a meeting or two to kind of work through some of these issues, you think, PJ?
We're going to need information from DOT and have all that resolved. If you're going to be out of town, will we have time to meet this time? Okay. Can you just restate the motion? Just want to see what's included in it.
Okay. Gary, if I understood the motion, go ahead.
No, I was going to have her read it.
Oh, Jerry, go ahead and read it back.
Moved by Drews and seconded by Rundy to continue the construction permit to the February 11th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting.
Jerry, I can't hear you. I hear them over talking, so I didn't hear a word of that. I'm sorry.
And PJ wanted to hear.
Okay. Moved by Drews and seconded by Rundy to continue the construction permit to the February 11th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting.
But we moved it to the 25th of February.
I need a substitute motion for that.
Oh, we do because of the date?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So move it to the 25th of February.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Does that clarify what you wanted to hear, PJ? For the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you looking for something else? Because I know sometimes there's some things you want to know.
Just want it clear of what they have to do up until before that meeting.
Okay, you want it clear that there's no work to be done or anything of that until that meeting.
Well, you want the violations cleared up to that, before they have the hearing. So it'd be scheduled for that meeting.
Well, we want them to meet with y'all to work out what needs to be done with those violations. That's our intent of this.
And I guess.
The meeting, not have the violations
But have a
fixed.
plan.
Because that was discussed earlier.
Have a plan to, I guess what, and I'm speaking maybe out of turn here, but if I could.
Go ahead.
I think it's important from my perspective that you have the meeting, a plan is developed, let's say, to resolve some of these outstanding issues. But the issue with the DOT in terms of the drainage into that ditch, and I think that issue does need to be resolved.
And we should probably not have a meeting until that's done.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I agree with Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Rivers. I do think we have separate issues here with regard to the next meeting, perhaps that meeting or scheduling of the hearing of this application. Perhaps that's continued to a meeting with the condition that the applicant obtain the information that DOT is requesting. That's kind of separate from the conditional use issues and the use issues. So that would just be my suggestion if we want to focus on this application, move it to another meeting with a suggested condition that the DOT's request be complied with.
Okay, very good. I agree.
So then we would need to do another substitute motion to add that in there, that the DOT request be complied with. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
I would offer that as a substitute.
A second.
Motion and seconded. Any further discussion? Everyone aware of the motion that is going to be continued to the 25th, February 25th. Parties are going to meet and work to clarify the DOT request issue. That's in summary, if I understand correctly.
I don't believe that's correct.
Huh?
I don't believe that's correct.
Okay. By all means, Jerry, can you correct me?
The substitute motion moved by Drews and seconded by Marsh to continue the construction permit to the February 25th Planning Commission meeting, and the applicant meet with planning staff to have a plan developed to resolve the outstanding violation issues and to submit information regarding the DOT request and that it's complied with.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I think the intent is that the meeting be continued for purposes of obtaining for the applicant to provide the information requested by the DOT, I believe.
Correct.
Let's.
And not hold a meeting schedule a meeting until after that's received.
I'm looking at page 14 of 21, additional comments to the property owner from DOT. The department doesn't allow increased flows from drainage into right-of-way. That being said, a detention pond or other controls will be required. The existing culvert that was placed last year at your fence line should also have some type of outlet protection so it doesn't cut a hole and wash material out into the right-of-way. Can you please address these issues on your plans and send it back? So the intent would be that the applicant would need to address these concerns with DOT and provide that information to this commission.
Agreed.
Then the meeting can be held after that information is obtained, but no earlier than February 25th. How about that?
So then we need to adjust the wording of it, that,
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
Will that work?
Yeah.
that would work. So then we would need a motion to that effect.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at a substitute motion.
I'm getting confused.
Yes, okay.
It's layers upon layers. We're trying to get it figured out right.
Yes, I move to continue the request for construction permit, CP 18-10, to a time after the applicant satisfies the concerns of South Dakota DOT as described in their comment on page 14 of the staff report, and that the meeting will be scheduled, after that the Department of Transportation is satisfied with the response, no earlier than February 25th.
And, yeah, correct. And the meeting is held no earlier than
Yeah,
February
the meeting
25th.
is held. The meeting with the Planning Commission is held no earlier, yes. Okay.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
A second, any further discussion? Everyone's good with that. Everyone know what we're doing on this one. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you for the good work on that one, and the questions. And all right, I would entertain a motion to recess for about 10 minutes so we can take a quick break.
And how late?
Moved.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Second. Before we vote, the discussion, I do believe PJ's just got one quick thing so we could just make sure that this is something we.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody can be here for at least another hour. The consultant from Matrix is here, flew in for this meeting to give this presentation. We're paying a lot of money for him to be here. We didn't expect the items today to be as long as they were, but they are. It is what it is. But as long as everybody can be at least an hour, that's still okay?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll reconvene at 11:28.
Not until 2.
I make a motion to reconvene our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
Second.
Motion second. We are missing Sandy, but she'll be back. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. We have reconvened our meeting. That takes us to item number 9, right?
8.
8.
Yep.
I was like, wait a minute. I wrote all over my paperwork here, so I'm like, wait a minute. What number am I at? 9. 8.
Item 8 is ordinance amendment 1901 to amend or adopt the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan. As you're aware, on December 20th, 2016, the Board of Commissioners budgeted money for us to hire a consultant and do interviews for a consultant eventually to look at our comprehensive plan and make recommendations for the adjunct documents as well. What you're going to be hearing today is a public draft that was put together by Matrix Design Group LLC based on public comments that were received through a bunch of public workshops, and the speaker will go through that more as we go on today. So I'm going to yield the floor to Rick from Matrix Design Group, because I know he's going to need all the time he can get.
All right, start that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the rest of the Planning Commission. Thanks for having me in today, and I will give you the good news that we're not going to ask you to make a decision on the document today. So,
thank you.
But I think in light of that, we've got a little shorter presentation, so what we want to do, I think what we're looking at here is that the Commission will probably have a number of hearings on the comp plan. I'm kind of jumping to the end of my presentation here to set the framework for it. And that we will bring this forward to you over a series of meetings to your liking. It'll probably be the best way to do these often find is to decide we're going to do chapters 1 through 3 on this date, and we're going to do 4 through 6 on this date and such, so that you actually work through it. The problem with just saying we're going to meet on the comp plan on a given day is that you get all the way through chapter 8 and somebody comes back in and wants something changed on chapter 2, and then you just keep going in a circle. So it often works better to run through it in a set method and then have a final meeting where you make your ultimate recommendation, which is what you're going to be doing out of this process, is recommending to the board your desires on this document and going forward with that. Now, the document we have for you today, what we'd like to do in the presentation today is really focus on how you should use the document, what it means, what is the comp plan, how does it relate to the other documents we're talking about, what does it mean for your life going forward, how does it fit into everyday work that you do here on the commission, and just talk about how that will be put into use going forward. We'll also bring up you do have a comment matrix in front of you from the few comments we have received. This document was published in July, and so these are the comments that we have received. In fact, I think we had a few of them last night, but we're trying to keep a matrix of all these together, and these are all in page order, so you can just simply step through them as you do those chapters to see what other people have said out in the community relative to what we're looking at. But we'll give you some brief background, project status, what public engagement went into this, which is important because the document is not what I think should be right for Pennington County. It's what all of you and the public and everyone else has told us that they would like to see in the comprehensive plan. And so the plan has been designed to reflect that. There's obviously some technical details in some places where somebody in the public didn't bring up that topic. But in a lot of these things that we're putting out there, these are things that have been brought up of different concerns. And we'll want to talk about those as we go through. So as far as the project status, talking about overall the comprehensive plan, this is really for the county or for any local jurisdiction. This is a policy framework. This is kind of like your look at what you want to be in 2040 and how you plan to get there. But it doesn't have the specific details of other planning documents that you might be familiar with. So as you look at their little steps, sometimes it's drawn as a pyramid. Each one of these is supported by the other to a certain extent. But the comprehensive plan is really the foundational item. It's like the foundation on your house. Without a good comprehensive plan, you can't build a good structure on top of it. And so the zoning code, if you had building codes to put to bear, site plans, roadway construction, all this kind of stuff has some relevance to what the comp plan provides as general guidance. But in doing that, three key factors of what a comp plan does. It's long-term. This plan is View to 2040 is our slogan. That's our website. And that's literally what we're planning for, is the year 2040. So as we look down the road 20 years from now, what is it we're trying to achieve in the county? This doesn't mean we're reflecting everything you currently do, but this is what we'd like to achieve. It's comprehensive in nature too. The comp plan covers a broad range of topics. What color is the land use? Today you had a hearing about whether that should be a residential use or a commercial use. Well, that's obviously in the land use element we have, and it's an important part of a comprehensive plan. But there's so much more. There's policies on transportation and public health and safety and flood control. And so there's a wide range of topics. But because it's a foundational policy document, because there are such a broad range of topics, it's also general. This is a general document. In fact, in many states, they call these general plans as opposed to comprehensive plans. Just depends which adjective you think is more fitting for your circumstance. But it does provide a vision for the future. Besides the land use diagram, we have a set of goals, policies, and implementations that help guide where we're trying to go. And it's a tool that you use for both land use as well as resource management types decisions. Now, in our next why are we updating this? Part of it's because it's out of date. Your old plan has gotten old. It doesn't address some of the current needs and changes that have occurred here in the county over the last number of years. It's addressing current opportunities and challenges. And this comes a lot from what we got from the public workshops and what people told us they would like to have addressed. Now, how we go about addressing that, that's going to be part of what your next several hearings will look at, as you look at these policies and say, is that the right way? Now, a lot of it, you'll come back at these different hearings and you'll have some questions, or I don't quite like how that policy is going, or I think it's going the wrong direction, I think it's too deep. Those are the things you can provide to EJ, and he can either shoot it off the hip and answer it, or he will send it, we'll take it back and we'll write you the answers like in this comment matrix we had. And this is what we suggest, even if we do a red line strikeout. Because for most every problem and most every opportunity, there is more than one way to do it. And if you don't like this one, we'll try to figure out a different one that better fits what you feel is reflective of Pennington County's needs and where you want to be in 2040. We're also correcting for a number of inconsistencies and redundancies. Not as much on the redundancy side because your current general comprehensive plan is very thin. But as far as inconsistencies, there are a broad range of things that are not consistent. A lot of those were in the land use map. And we'll talk a little bit about what we've done to the land use diagram to get rid of perhaps some of the nonconformities that current development has with some of its placement. And then restructuring for ease of use. If you've gone through the element, it's 100 and some pages, but it doesn't take you too long to read some of it because you can use the goals and the topic areas to find what you're trying to find, and the policies are fairly straightforward underneath that. I wouldn't say it's an exciting read, but it's not a long read compared to some more detailed staff reports, perhaps. When we're all said and done, you're going to provide a recommendation to the board for their approval and their consideration. They'll have public hearings as well. But after that, we'll also be looking at making changes to some of the other implementing tools that you have in your planning tool belt. So the zoning ordinance, the subdivision regulations, nuisance ordinance 106, and the floodplain ordinance. These are the four we specifically know that we are going to address as far as what might need to be done. And what we're doing at this point is providing a white paper that describes all the changes that should be done as far as those different documents, both to make them consistent with the comprehensive plan, but also to make them reflective of what's currently needed in the county. So it was a 7-task or 7-phase kind of layout to this project. You can see our check marks there. We're all the way down through number 6, and we're now in number 7. This is how the document was developed. It's kind of a step-by-step format where things built upon each other. We looked at existing conditions, what is the county like today, and the trends for the future. We looked at issues and opportunities provided to us by the community. We looked at some alternative approaches to some of these policy choices. When I said before that there's multiple ways to treat an issue, we actually ran a number of those choices by the community workshops, and the community provided us input on which ones of those choices they thought were best. Now, community workshops are a smattering of your overall population. It's not like it's a scientific survey of the entire feelings of the county, but it gives you a good feeling for those that are engaged in the community and familiar with it, where they would like to go. So as far as that workshop input, we had 5 workshop sets. And it started off early on where it looked as if there were going to need to be 3 geographic looks at the county, because there were some distinct differences and needs of the 3 basic blocks of the county. The logo itself in the bottom corner reflects that, whether it's from the Black Hills to the more urbanized central Pennington County area or to the Eastern Plains areas. There was desire to have a plan that reflected some of these differences. And we have both the policy sections as well as the workshops were oriented that way. Workshops are on the right side of the screen there as far as what we did. We walked them through the creation of the vision statement that's up front in the document. We did that at 2 different sets of workshops. We looked at a community assessment, that is looking at the issues and opportunities they would like looked at. Talking about alternatives, developing draft concepts from those different alternatives, and then finally workshop just talking about the pre-release of the actual document. So the public's been involved all the way from April 2017 through June 2018, with this draft document being published at the end of July, and it's been out for public review since that time. And in case you want to know where they were, there they are.
Were there many people attending those?
At the most, probably 12, 13.
I see. Thank you.
For a couple of them, maybe a little less. But Rapid City kind of grew over time. Wall got a little smaller over time. They had one of the biggest showings originally with, let's see, they're in that could count heads. It's a little over a dozen. That middle picture on the left side there is the first median wall. So they were good collections of input. We also did interviews we talked to the mayors and or parts of the city councils for the different communities. So we had meetings with Rapid and Hill City and Wall and several others, getting their input. Obviously, the county doesn't regulate incorporated areas, but you are neighbors. And so talking to the neighbors and how things are working was also part of this conversation. We had a whole series of interviews early on with staff about what they thought was needing fixing. And then I think we talked to all the board members one-on-one. And I think we talked to a number of the planning commissioners at the time going forward. So we got as broad a brush as we could looking at the different inputs. We also have a website, viewed2040.com. This is a location, at least for right now. Important thing is if you know somebody in your neighborhood, somebody in the area that's interested in the plan and would like to be part of this conversation, right from that home page there, if you scroll just a little bit down, you can download the comprehensive plan from there. If you also go to the resources tab, there's an online library where you can download the other document, which is the existing conditions report. So all these are available from here, as well as people could add themselves to the mailing list, and they could provide comments on the website as well. So as we go through our hearings, we'd expect this to be a place people could be directed to easily provide input to the commission. Well, I've got this in my hand, the existing conditions report. This was published in March 2018. And again, we do comprehensive plans. We try to understand what's happening today. We've actually had a lot of places we've been to where people thought it was broken because of a certain reason, and that wasn't really what was going on. And so it's sort of like going to the doctor. If you get treated for the wrong thing, it may be the right diagnosis for that symptom, but it may not be the right cure for what you actually have. So we have a good foundational piece, lots of nice maps and information in here. I know we got several comments about, well, it'd be nice to add this to the front of the comprehensive plan, because there is a short piece of background there. Well, some of it might be in here, and we'll certainly bring over the important pieces from the comments into that piece as we go forward. Some of the things we looked at quickly were I think we gave the Planning Commission last time a broader look at what was in the background report. We don't want to drag that out too long, but it is important to understand population dynamics. Basically what happens, the county is growing, but a lot of that growth ends up being brought into incorporated communities, and a lot of that ends up being in Rapid City. You can see the county's population down there in the green is pretty darn flat when it comes down to it. It grew up to the 1990s and just sort of flattened out. And that wasn't because nobody was coming here, it's just that they were coming to places that got annexed into the adjacent communities. Let's go back there. So right now you're at 106,000, so you're looking to grow. This is what the South Dakota State University did with their projection for 2035. So 5 years short, but you're looking to grow about 24,000 people over this next time period to 2035. And you could probably a few more thousand beyond that then to get to 2040. Another thing we did was look at existing land use. Now, when we talk about our future land use map, this is important, and this is important primarily for agriculture. I'll keep you in suspense to get to that answer in a minute. And then public lands are a big part of the framework of Pennington County, both from a tourism recreational standpoint, as well as just the wide open spaces kind of component and resource management pieces. They're important for how the federal government looks at resource management for things such as timber harvesting in the Black Hills, or the actual protection and use of some of the grassland areas on the far east. Then you've got Ellsworth Air Force Base, as well as Camp Rapid in the middle of the county, which both have large military populations and operations, which also influence the county's future. All right, the comprehensive plan. That's what we're here for. Thinner than the background report, more to the point perhaps. But as I mentioned, the plan organization was looked at these three distinct areas. So with the Black Hills, Eastern Plains, and Central Pennington area. Now you may ask how we originally came up with that. The Central Pennington one was based on where the municipal planning organization area is, the area where Pennington County and Rapid City and Box Elder are all part of this overall regional planning, which is primarily driven for transportation planning, but also has other regional planning aspects. We were also looking originally at how to break between the Black Hills and the areas to the east, and we were looking at the boundary for some of the aquifers in that area. And so this line was a good fit for that break in the aquifer where the foothills come down, as well as where the more urbanized area is. And so this was used going forward as far as development of the plans and programs. So we have elements listed here, from land use being Chapter 3 all the way down to natural and cultural resources being Chapter 10, and then an implementation chapter beyond that. And this thing on the right here is an example of one of the worksheets we were doing with the community, where we had one of their issues on the left and we gave them several choices on the right, and they actually helped us guide it. So when you look at what's in here, this was really as best we could trying to get a flavor for what Pennington County wanted to have in there. Two key terms is a goal. Goal is just a future end state. It's what you want to be. If you could think of it, it'd be my goal to do something. What is that end part? It doesn't really convey an action. It's just an end of where you're going. Policies are supposed to be a specific guide for an action. They usually have some resolution about what you're trying to do, and they support the goal that they're under. The way we do comprehensive plans, you will have a goal, and then you'll have the policies that support that goal underneath it. So it's very easy to read it from a hierarchical standpoint. Constructing policy. You find a lot of happy little verbs in here, and this will be interesting because you'll see in your comment matrix there, number 1 with Commissioner Johnson provided the comment about the question about shoulds and shalls of the life. And this will be something that you will have to weigh in on. And I could probably honestly say this probably comes up in every comprehensive plan we do, is the conversation about how far do you want to go with it? How much surety? Now, when you look at the shells, as you might guess, shell means it's something you really intend to do. It's not much of an ambiguity statement there. This is a real statement you want to do. I think there were some comments about the bikeway, and people talked about it'd be great to have that bikeway crossing. Well, okay, it would be great. Could you afford it? So we want to make sure those are peddled as more of the evaluate and consider kind of language, and I think there were some good suggestions in this comment matrix towards that. But if it's something you really want to have done, you want to actually have should and shall statements. And the reason for that is, the comment says we want to look at this as a guidance document, but you need to have some sense of what that guidance is going to be. I can use for this morning this audience here, since we don't have any other audience on the general plan here. Right? But this audience here was quoting the general plan and what it said and what it meant and why they thought that's why they bought their property and that's what they thought their future was going to be. So you want to have the shoulds and shalls in there, because really the document's laying out this is how the board, being the final action, sees the decision-making process going forward. So when you look at your comprehensive plan and you have a project in front of you, it should give you some guidance to how to make that kind of decision. Now, you just go through a checklist and you know the answer and you really don't need a planning commission? No, never. There's way too many different things that can happen in the world for us to ever have that kind of document. And that's one of those cases too. We have some jurisdictions that want to nail everything down. And it's sort of like the devil's advocate. The more you tighten down, the more that slides through your fingers and the worse things get. So we have to find a good balance where we're making the right level of direction. But it's important for the public to be able to understand what they're buying, for those that might look at a comprehensive plan before they make their purchase. For those that might have a disagreement on how properties should be developed, they should be able to look at this plan and get a good sense of the policy statement of the board and how that will play out as far as future development. There will be nuances to every project that will need your guidance to figure out how that applies. All these things are not going to be crystal clear. We hope that we don't have a document that's ambiguous where we're causing more problems by making it readable both ways. But you need to have some overall guidance so people have a good expectation, so that yourselves, when you're making decisions, so that staff, when they're writing a staff report, have a good basis for the recommendations that they're making and that you're providing up to the board. So every element, as you go through them, has some background material. And as I said, the background material is just kind of a Reader's Digest version of this. So if you ever wanted to find out more, hopefully you can match up the chapters, the same things. But the comments mentioned a few things they thought were really important to have in the background piece of the comprehensive plan. And we're all for that. If there's anything that makes it look clear as to why we're doing something, we'll certainly put that information in there. So keep those comments coming and we'll go for that. You look on the right side of the page, that's a standard goal and policy. Something you want to look at as you go through here. Again, we have our should and shalls, or how we want to play these. I think you want to be specific in what you're going for, but if you think it's too prescriptive on specific policies, maybe that shall should become a should. Or perhaps it's something that we don't quite know the implications, and so it should be a study, as opposed to we should do this. Those will be things we don't have to solve today, but that's what you're going to be looking for as you go through this document in the coming couple months. The other thing is these icons. Icons were developed with this idea that we had the three distinct geographies and they would have different implications. Now, as you look through this, you'll find that it didn't play out as often as we thought it might, as far as the things that only have a limited number of icons to them. But that's another area where you might want to make change. You may look at a policy and say, this doesn't apply to all three areas. I'm fine with this happening in central Pennington, but it's not going to happen on the two outside edges. You may find that we need to write a second policy. The way the policy is now is great for central Pennington and its urbanized needs, but for eastern and for the hills, we need to have a policy like that, but it needs to have a slightly different tilt to it. An example, give myself in trouble here, septic. Septic was a common discussion in the Black Hills. With the hard rock surface, the limited amount of percolation possible, they were more concerned about the performance of septic systems. The Eastern Plains, rarely ever a problem, for a big part because of how much land is available to most people out there. Conversation was also about, can we have lesser regulations on the Eastern Plains? If I own 1,200 acres, why should I have to come ask you for this? Keep an eye out for that. If something needs to be toned down, if we need to duplicate the policy so that the eastern side doesn't have the same regulations as some of the other places, that's okay too. We need to provide equal protection under the law, of course. But if making sure we get a nod there. But if we have differences in geography, differences in context, differences in circumstances, we can adjust policies to meet the needs of those different circumstances, and that is legitimate. See, we're good. So that's another thing to look for as you go through here, is see if those icons are right, or if you need to drop some off, or if we need to create a second policy that is better suited for that specific geography. And at the end is an implementation program. This is meant to be things that, kind of like a to-do list, if you will, at the end about how we get some of these done. You do not, every policy does not need an implementation program. If you say, we will look at a project in this way, or we will require this kind of density, you don't need an implementation program to tell you how to measure density. It's covered in the plan already. So look at them that way. They tell you what goal they're relevant to, and a kind of an idea for when you're going to start these. Comprehensive plan versus zoning. I'm making this one up last night because PJ said the commission might want to discuss the differences between the plans. So, but there is a discussion about animal keeping. How many chickens can you have on a residential lot? It's been a hot topic during the development of the plan. I don't think it's quite solved yet, but the comprehensive plan, we're talking about the county shall develop limits on animal keeping residential areas. Now, we've got a shell there because, in this case, the county needs to do something about it. It is a problem. There are places, obviously, if you've got that 1,200-acre ranch, nobody's going to be counting your chickens. But if you're on a 1-acre parcel next to another 1-acre parcel, they may not be happy that you're raising 100 roosters. So this is where we have to figure that out. Now, the general plan does not tell you how to do it. It just states the county's policy is we are going to provide regulations on animal keeping. And then the zoning can go into a whole bunch of other stuff. Number and types of animals by zone, animal equivalents. How many chickens makes up a cow? And, you know, as far as comparisons, some codes do that. Minimum lot sizes by zone, minimum setbacks by zone. How do you deal with enclosures and structures? How do you deal with maintenance and nuisance, water quality protections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even placement. One of the biggest things in the Rapid City area meetings we had was somebody, they didn't mind them keeping the chickens, but why did they have to keep them on the side yard that was only 5 feet from their house as opposed to the other part of their acreage that they had? So that's a zoning code. You don't have to deal with that the next several months. Yeah. But this blue box is coming up in your future. But I think this is a good, what I was trying to get here, it's a good illustration of the use of a shell. That's not really a bad thing because it's something you think the county shall do. It needs to do. But it doesn't tell you how you're going to do it. It doesn't, at this point, take away somebody's specific uses. It doesn't say agriculture is not an important part. There's just times and places for certain land uses. Same question right here was, should that lot be commercial or should it be residential? Well, there's places for all these different uses down to the level of animal keeping. So this is where we're going with the overall policy plan. Provide guidance. The future land use diagram was another area that made a lot of changes in the map. In fact, we'll have to figure out for the hearing you do on the land use, we'll have to figure out how to get a good map to you so you can see where some of these changes are. Obviously, this map's a little small. I will tell you, because somebody commented about that, how can we read this? It's online as a PDF version, so you can zoom in fairly closely. Eventually, this will all be brought over into the Rapid Map portal, so they'll be able to go online and look just like you can today about your property and locations and things around you. But let's talk about what we did in general here. I talked earlier, or hopefully baited your interest with these inconsistencies that are out there in the world now. One of your biggest inconsistencies is in agriculture. Because right now in the general plan you have two kinds of agriculture. You have a 10-acre minimum and 40-acre minimum. You had thousands of lots in the 40-acre minimum that were less than 40 acres, some only a few acres in size. They obviously weren't agriculture types, but you do have issues. So what we're trying to do here, and pat my own self in the back here, we're not trying to be overly prescriptive. In this case, we think for agriculture, we've helped out. So we think zoning will get more specific, and it might break it out to be the 10 and 40 bit going forward. But if you wanted to change your property, you wouldn't have to get a general plan amendment as well. You just get a zone change amendment. You're still in that overall category. So the agriculture category is designed for agricultural production and the uses that were attached with that. But we got rid of the general plan inconsistencies for, I think it was over 5,000 properties that were not sized to match their general plan designation. A follow-on activity will be actually creating a zoning map, and you could break it into two things, you could break it into three things, whatever you might want to have. But there is a thing in agricultural areas where you have the problem of division of properties, and that could be as simple as the fact you've passed on your ranch to 6 children and how you do that. It may be the fact that you want to be able to give a home site to one of your children. How do you do that? So there's all these difficulties in an agricultural situation where you want to take your land, you want to just give some acreage to a child, and you can't because of the size limits. So the 10 acres seem to cover the intent of what the agriculture is looking for. We can get more specific with zoning, but this takes away that inconsistency with a lot of properties had right now with the general plan, which we think is a good thing for their long-term capability to get loans and all sorts of things. Another broad category that came up was the fact that we have transitional areas that don't have the land use categories for residential were a little odd in the current general plan. They had big gaps in them, and there was a lot of demand for what people wanted as far as home sizes that didn't really fit into the fabric very well. So you could end up having a subdivision that had a few acre properties, and then at the same time in that same designation, somebody can come in with a couple thousand square foot kind of property. So what we did is we broke up the low density residential to provide a little more flexibility in there. We have a 1 acre minimum as well as we have a 5 acre minimum as opposed to the current, which was a 3 to 10 acre minimum.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
You know, the question that came to my mind in these two, the ranchette residential and the rural residential, which one is 5 and then the other 3 acres. You know, there's a lot of these developments now that have various, particularly in the Black Hills area, where they're odd shaped and they're various sizes. Some might be 2.98 and one might be 4.34 and one might be 5. You know, so I can just, to me, these are the 3 and the 5. It could be really difficult when you have an area that could have, well, some could be 3 and some could be more than 3. And I mean, is there any, help me understand how that will not lead to confusion here with these different sizes?
Well, the different size, what we've gone to is having minimums. So this is the minimum lot size you can
Whereas
create.
an area where there's one that's with between, oh, I see. So between 3 and 5, then it would just simply be zone it all rural residential.
Yeah.
And you'd catch it all.
And I was going to say my slide, I forgot to update from last time. So where it says low density residential, 3 DUs per acre, it's supposed to be 2 DUs per acre.
Oh, well, I'm looking at this on my, because I can't read up there, but.
So the idea here is that this is
3
your.
and 5 though, is that the right numbers?
For
The rural
ranchette?
residential, here is rural residential, and this book says the minimum size is 3 acres. Is that the correct one?
Yeah.
Up there you're showing 1 acre.
Right. Is it 3 though, or?
I think we had some changes since the last slide was made,
But I see what you're talking about. Like, you know, somebody's got 2.5 acres, but they're obviously in a rural setting.
Right. You know, we see it all the time, these areas where they're all different sizes and shapes and configurations and.
Yeah, you can, what you do if you want to get more refined is you can create zoning districts that are more refined than that.
But I think if this is, I mean, rural residential, at least in the Black Hills area, 1 acre is too small. It should be 3. We don't want a bunch of little tiny 1 acre lots.
Yeah,
You're talking
rural
about
residential
for
is,
rural
is
residential?
1 to 3.
What's that?
The 3 acre minimum now.
Yeah, that's the correct
Since
one.
that slide was made, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so 3, and then that makes sense to me.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes covenants and conditions dictate it also. I know, well, the subdivision in which I live, there are parcels that are less than 1 acre, and mine is 4.5 acres, so I would think there would be some confusion.
Well, your current comp plan has these kind of limits in it. It's just that we broke them up a little differently. So it's the same kind of idea, just applied a little differently to better match what's going on. In fact, a few of these were changed. We had public comment about some neighborhoods and how they were laid out and the certain acreage minimums and what should,
sure,
you know, so they kind of tweaked that a little bit as we went through that, which is why that slide is a lot of date. But. And that's something we can play with as you might want. What typically happens in a county or community is you will have a lesser number of comp plan designations, and then those will branch out to a more detailed zoning code definition. And the zoning pieces can apply to specific areas. If you have a certain part of the county where you have a lot size that's a little different, as long as it meets the minimum of the comprehensive plan, it's still consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the zoning then can tell you, no, you're going to be exactly this sizes. Say you have a more of a standard subdivision layout, the zoning could say exactly what the lot minimums and how they should be laid out and what kind of sizes they should be and all that type of thing. Whereas the comp plan just says, hey, as long as your density is in this kind of range, you're okay.
So can I ask one more
Go ahead.
question? Going back to the ag, of the allowed uses, and there's some various bullets. Under staff, so the last bullet under ag, these 10 acre minimum lot size, it says staff housing, but in parentheses it says minimum 40 acre lot size. What does that mean?
if you wanted to have more by right, having worker housing, you had to have at least a 40-acre parcel. Given that if you were going to have a more larger ranch kind of setting where you might need on-site housing, that the 40 acres would be better suited for that, and that it also gives more flexibility and be able to site that, to be able to use the septic systems for multiple units on one parcel and that type of thing. So is there magic to 40? I don't believe we had any magic with that, but the idea was that 10, you're starting to mix into neighborhoods, whereas at 40, you're more of a ranch or a farm that stood off from your neighbors more, and that having staff housing wouldn't be as much of a burden.
So really, this is, if you're thinking of in the vernacular out in the country, if you wanted to put something there for your hired man, essentially.
Put a mobile home unit out there, and
yeah.
This is allowing that as more of a thing you can do. It says you can do it there instead of it being something you have to always go through other exercises to have that happen.
Thank you. I just didn't know what it meant, so thank you.
Yeah. So instead of it being a conditional use kind of thing, it's an allowed use.
Yeah, fair enough.
But that's why the 40 was just to get to the size where we thought you could stand off from the neighbors enough where it wouldn't be a.
Okay.
Other big change on here is public land is now called open space because it is usually managed as an open space resource. And open space resources can cover the whole range of things from extractive kind of uses or use of natural resources to preservation of resources, such as you have with the national park areas or the Forest Service areas and the grasslands. So overall, the map, you'll see this big green areas, and that is just publicly owned land. So we didn't designate anybody's private property as open space. It had to be owned or managed by the federal government or the state. Then the planned unit developments are more or less going away. The ones that are there will be designated planned unit development still. The item we had discussed earlier in this conversation was planned unit developments kind of let you write your own rules. And the problem was we were getting all these your own rules all over the place, and it was seen that we should just go with regular designations for these areas in the future going forward. The last key thing on here was PUD sensitive. We still haven't quite figured out exactly where that came from or what it was for, but it appears to just be a shrug. Didn't know what to put there. We'll see if somebody wants to plan it in the future, but developing a PUD is a cumbersome process, and it takes time, it takes money, it causes additional staff resources to be spent trying to manage them, and it just became obvious that nobody had really just sat down and figured out what these things should be, so they just put PUD sensitive and hoped it would solve itself someday. So we solved it. So everywhere there was a PUD sensitive now has a designation. When I was talking about the existing land use map earlier, we looked at how these areas are being used to figure out what they might want to be. So we didn't designate them open space. The private lands, we designated them for use. It may be a ranchette type thing or rural estates. A lot of this was up in the northwest from Rapid City, going on Nemo Road and that kind of area. A lot of the PUD sensitive was up in there. There was a lot of PUD sensitive all through the Black Hills. And a lot of it was in holdings inside the Forest Service properties. And again, it was areas that I'm not sure what they thought might happen there, but they have certain sizes. We gave them a designation that matched that low intensity use that was appropriate for the forest areas for a private piece of property.
That seems like an insurmountable task. I mean, the planned unit developments with which I've been involved are each unique, each specific, each.
They're still here. So if they were.
Yes, but so those that are already zoned
PUD
would stay that way. It would not be a legal non-conforming.
Correct.
It would be legal and conforming. But if people in the future want to do something unique and different that traditionally would require planned unit development zoning, what are you then suggesting it be called?
Well, you would come in through some type of specific plan.
Well, hopefully when we go through the zoning ordinance and we have the discussions about that, that we're going to find the fixes in there. And a lot of it can be done through conditional use permits.
I see. Okay, and
It's
that makes
just,
sense.
a lot of the county was becoming PUDs, and like you had said, they're all unique and they take a lot of effort
Yeah.
to manage because they all are separate. But we're going to honor the ones that are there.
Yes, yeah, I know in the city they use a plan development overlay, I call it, the cloud of death, but nonetheless, and the county doesn't generally use the overlay, they do the zoning. So now we're gonna perhaps just have it all fall under conditional use? Or would it be a plan development overlay?
Well, we have used overlay in the past, but not as
Sure.
frequent as the city does.
Yeah.
But it would depend on what we do when we come through with the zoning ordinance changes and what permitted uses or conditional uses we ascribe to each one of
Sure.
those. That's where hopefully the fixes will be.
Okay, thank you.
And the zoning code will provide a lot more answers to how some of this stuff can go forward and happen. But I think it's important what you just said about we didn't create any legal nonconformings because we kept the PUD category in there. If you read it, it just says we're not going to apply it to any new areas.
Sure.
But anybody who had one approved already is still a PUD. They're not legally nonconforming. They're under their past approvals and can keep going forward that way. So that's an important
Thank you.
piece, especially this morning you were talking about that kind of thing. So for each designation, it goes through, look at the lists. Now, zoning codes often have pages of lists where we break down dry cleaner with on-site processing, dry cleaner without on-site processing. This, it just gets to be a laundry list. Again, we're general. That's what we call it. So we're being general. We're looking at the types. I think we had a comment about, well, we didn't put any roller coasters in the list. And we have tourist facilities in the list. And so that's what that would cover that. So think of these in a broad category. If you really think there's something missing from here that needs to be added, we can certainly add it, but it's not intended to be a laundry list of every iteration of something that could be there. It's supposed to tell us these are the types of things. And again, here's your chance to get beyond that should and shall business to where there's a little interpretive piece in here. Well, that's a tourist commercial activity. That fits into that category. It's good. So we want to get that fine nuance. Okay, we're at the end, getting towards the end. This format is something we would typically use for you going forward because it allows us to keep track of what everybody provided comments for. And if you look at the matrix, it'll tell you who said it. Tells you these are in order by where they occur in the document. So it's not every one person's comments, then somebody else's comments, and you're flipping all through the document. So you want to start on chapter 2, you can find the comments on chapter 2. Has their comment in there, then it has our discussion on the side. Some of these we just recently got, so we didn't flesh out some of them all the way, but there's a few places you'll see some red line text where we suggested a change. There's places you'll see requested change to be made where we just say, okay, we agreed with the commenter, and we'll make that adjustment. And you'll see some that say for discussion with the PC, which may not be today, but this will be things that there were some common threads as you look through the matrix, the use and should and shall. I think it's common to a lot of the discussion about how likely is this to happen. Now, I think there definitely are some shells in the world. So this would be a challenge to see it. I mean, I've had a jurisdiction tell me, just change everything to should. That's definitely a choice, but I think there are some things, the animal keeping, for instance, I think there's been broad agreement that we need something to address that. How is another question, but it seems like it's a shell kind of thing. I could be wrong, but it seemed from what people have told us. So think about those, it's that kind of shell. If we need to soften the language in the shell, we can.
Go ahead.
Where I stumble a little on this is that the ones that I anticipate will have some costs associated with it. I just don't feel, sitting in this chair, that I am capable or even have the authority to say shall or will when I know there's certain costs involved. And I think, well, how do I know that this is going to be considered to be a, good use of the the ultimate resources that are available. And so I think that's where I really stumble, are the ones that are, you know, it's going to cost money. And we're not the decision makers in that regard.
And that would be part of my answer back to you. As a planning commissioner, you should look at this from a planning standpoint. If you're making these hard decisions for like this morning about what to do, does this document help you in that decision? Resource management as far as money, that's the board's purview. And so by you agreeing that this language is something that needs to be covered from a planning standpoint, doesn't necessarily mean you agree the money side of it. That can be part of your conversation, but the board's the one that has to sign up to the allocation of resources. So you can kind of separate that a little bit, but I think the thing about the bikeways, it was a good idea, but I think it may have been expressed a little too strongly. It more sounds like you're building this bikeway, when the intent was that you're going to study the expansion in places that would make a difference. We actually had quite a bit of comments, surprisingly, both actually not the middle, but the two ends were very much into having expansions of bike facilities. The Black Hills was very into that, and some of the ability to ride out into the grassland areas out of Wall was something seen as being a beneficial thing. So there may be places in there where it'll be the county shall work with X, Y, and Z to evaluate the possibility and the funding potential for this. That's fine. That gives you a policy statement. It doesn't sound like the county's going to start getting the bulldozer out there and making a path. Because you're right, we don't know enough about it even to say where it would go. That's a good adjustment, I think, to that policy set, is to say we will work with these entities to evaluate the potential for the expansion. That's...
I may have misread this. By bike paths, do you mean bicycles or motorcycles?
Primarily the bicycle.
Okay, thank you.
We didn't, I don't remember anybody offering them anything about off-road motorcycling.
That was my thought, but I just thought I'd clarify.
Yeah.
Minor.
Yes. Yeah, definitely the pedaled kind. Although with electric bikes now, that's coming into question what that means.
Well, pedal bikes, and then you've got the segways, and they all kind of fit in that category.
That's right. I'm talking about 2 wheels and pedals.
The Black Hills area, a lot of people saw that as a tourist addition where people would come there and be able to ride some loop and go back to the hotel and drink the berry wine and whatever. Another thing to do that for an active set as opposed to those that are going to the tourist attractions, so more enjoying the nature kind of aspect, so an enhancement of the tourism industry. But again, putting in that much trail takes some money too. So that's how I'd explain how you might want to look at a few of these policies to see if we can add modifiers into a few of them that get it where you're in a comfortable range. But at the same time, we want to be able to provide some guidance for where we're trying to go with this. Staff housing, there's a few comments in there about, we talked about that a little bit with the 40 acre. There were some questions in here about that and why. Several comments about the economic development element. We had a county tourism board component and why we'd want that separately. Maybe the policy needs to be reworked to just put in those other entities to work, the county will work with. Another thing I didn't put on here but I want to point out is some people say, well, we already do that. Again, with that being that the comprehensive plan is the foundation, everything you already do really should already be consistent with this plan. So if we don't have current policy saying we're going to do this, but yet we're doing it, we really should put something in there. So just because you do it already doesn't mean it shouldn't be in the comp plan. And then I didn't put it, there were a number of comments about septic systems. There was a policy that had the inspections happening more frequently. I think a lot of that came out of the Black Hills kind of discussions, and that might be one of those examples where you break them apart. You keep the current system for the central and eastern plains, and maybe the Black Hills needs a more frequent, or maybe nobody needs a more frequent.
I think that needs to be handled really carefully because, I live up there. I have a septic system. Well, it truly isn't and I believe in the septic rules, but it truly isn't a one size fits all even up there because like we have septic system is sized for our house. Well, we have a bigger house than two people really need. It's just the two of us. So every 5 years, our guy comes out, he said, you know, there was nothing to pump. And so it's just not, and you know, nothing, so it's just not a one size fits all, even in the Black Hills. So I just think we have to be approach that pretty carefully.
This is a very sensitive topic, and I would look for your inputs on how we might adjust that. I mean, there were some causes for concern. As you said, there are different circumstances, and often the rule is you wait for failure, and sometimes you might not be able to afford that. We talked about the Black Hills, but there's also some areas in south of Rapid City that have some significant issues with.
And that's why I think that, I mean, I don't know, I just think that, you know, and I guess I made a recommendation to couch it really in terms of the health and safety issue, and we need an ordinance certain that ensures that. But this changing that from like 5 years to 3 years, it just requires so much more discussion and thought and, you know, digestion of this that I'd really encourage not that being so specific in this plan.
I think that would probably be a good one where you can use the comprehensive plan to set up. You said it needs more study, so go ahead and have a policy that says that. So instead of changing the rules right now, just have a policy that says the county should continue to evaluate its septic ordinances to respond to local needs. You can set a framework for how we might want to go without changing the rules, because in this case, you don't feel comfortable, and maybe other commissioners as well don't feel comfortable making changes to those rules, and they do have very localized effects. You could be one valley over in the Black Hills and have absolutely no problem.
Well, a lot of it has to do with the sizes of these lots. You know, the smaller the lots, the more potential you have for septic systems that, you know, affect your neighbor.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that lot size.
The challenge for you at this point is most of these things that are in here came from some sort of public input. So try to avoid the throw that one away, throw that one away. There's something there. So what's the best way for Pennington County to address that? If it's that you need to do another study to better figure this out, if you need to work with somebody to monitor the situation, if you know, there might be something else that can be done. And this is where I said, if you feel a certain way, send those comments through staff and they'll have us rewrite a couple different solutions. We can even go look at other places and see what they've done for you if it comes to that. So over the next several months, you're going to have the opportunity to ask more questions, ask for more refinements. You know, the comments we have so far aren't shocking. They're good refinements of things. I mean, I think we're going in a good path.
But everyone with whom you speak will have a different thought and opinion. I don't know how you will ever get closure on this. I mean, I don't know how you proceed forward, because again, we have our thoughts, but if you have 6 different people here, they will have 6 different thoughts, and it seems, again, an insurmountable task.
It does take a while. We did it with the mining ordinance. We sit here, we talk about it, we come together, we put all of our ideas out there, change some things, and then get the best document we can and then refer it forward. And that's the same thing I see with this, is we'll all agree on some of the stuff, disagree on some of the stuff, try to figure out what works best, and then send it forward with a recommendation to pass or not, one of the two. So, yeah, it took us how long for that mining ordinance?
15 years.
Oh my goodness.
No, it didn't take us 15 years. Don't listen to PJ on that one. But we had, 3-4 meetings, if I remember. We went through it section by section. Well, we took a few sections at a time. I think it was 3 or 4 meetings. And then we had a final meeting, and then, you know, made some final tweaks and then sent it up. And, you know, it wasn't, you know.
Sure.
I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect, but, you know, we came together, and that's what I envisioned this to be. Kathy,
But
you
I
were part
mean,
of that.
we are the next step. We aren't now backtracking, going to the town meetings.
No, that public
those are done.
engagement piece is complete, except for hearings.
Sure.
But at this point, the idea is that you're going to hold your hearings, make your recommendation to the board, and the board will hold their hearings, do the final adoption.
Can I skip back to on your slide under building code? See, that's another one that I feel, I don't feel like I know enough to say this should be in there or not. And so those are the kind of areas I'm thinking, well, I don't know. You know, I don't know how much it's going to cost. I don't know, you know, what the benefits. I just don't know enough about it. And so that's just an example of a few others in here where I just don't know.
Some of those, the building codes, the septic, those may be two areas where there's a policy about additional study needed. I think for quite a few of these, you go through there and think about what they're after. They're not that much of a stretch to go one way or the other. And yeah, you could find an individual circumstance that may not fit that case. I mean, that's a big county, a lot of different things going on. And that's really when you get down to what a variance is for. There's a circumstance on that property that doesn't fit the norm, it doesn't fit the rules, and you have to make a variance finding. For most things, I think you'll be able to find your way through this. I mean, I've done several dozen comp plans in 25 states, and many times people have the same question: how can we do that? I don't know. And you will. Yeah, you'll find a good common spot. But you may have a couple of these where you think they're so big that it is again, like building codes, it is a conversation that's out there. There is some desire to have, for instance, you have people moving here from other locations. If I was coming here to buy a house, a lot of people would assume it's been inspected. That I bought that house, it's actually on the property where they said it was on the property, that the walls actually are 2x6s instead of 2x4s or whatever it may be. But you don't know. And so when you're buying a house, you're taking if you didn't watch it getting built, you're taking how you do that. And you don't have to, at this point, figure out exactly how you're going to do it, how you're going to fund it. A lot of places obviously do it across the country, but it does typically raise the cost of development because at the least you have to pay for an inspector, and that's usually a county employee, and that's usually done through a fee reimbursement off of your building permit, typically, because it's attributable to a piece of property and to the benefit of a piece of property. But on this, you may want to define a study going forward about what you want to be looked at. You know, we need to get together some costs on this. And there's two pieces of this one. One is the building codes and, you know, attaching ourselves to the international building code standards. The other is to have the actual inspections to make sure that those standards were followed. That may be two separate policies you want to have and provide direction to us about what you want to do. And again, for the inspections, it may be that you need staff to evaluate, you know, if we were to add a building inspector, what would that add to the cost of a standard house? That would be a piece of information that, you know, could be brought forward, and then you can decide if you're going to add inspections later on.
I have one other question.
Go ahead.
You know, this is really nice, this matrix that you have of the comments and your responses and so on. I mean, in reading, and I'm going to study it more a little bit because it's really, we can learn from other people that have these comments and your response and so on. So moving forward, all of the comments that come in, whether they come through the planning department or get directly to you or something, they'll all be incorporated into this matrix? Is that the idea?
Usually not necessarily the ones that we do here in the meetings like this conversation back and forth,
I mean,
but
right,
yeah,
but
public
written
comments.
Ones, the written ones will.
Yeah.
If you receive written ones, whether they come through the planning office or you directly, they'll all come on this matrix.
Yes.
So that we can see, because this is really interesting to.
Because it makes it harder for you to, you know, they hand you a stack of letters and go, these people wrote you comments, and you're supposed to sit there and figure out what goes on.
It's very nice. Yeah.
I can have empathy. I was a planning commissioner for 7 years somewhere, so I've gone through piles of staff reports at the last minute trying to figure out what I'm supposed to make of all of it.
You did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else, or any other questions?
If you'd like to approve it, I'm open to that too. But
I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on this
Told
one.
you they'd laugh at that. But moving forward from here, we do want to have a discussion, maybe not today, maybe the next meeting, to try and break down the proposed draft by chapters and set meeting dates, so we can have that kind of scheduled goal of each one. This is what we're going to talk about, and make sure we set the time aside so we're not going too far in between meetings.
And those meetings they are considered the public hearings, or is a public hearing beyond that?
No, they're public hearings.
They're considered to be the hearings. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be advertising all of them.
I was gonna say, you had to do the
Yeah, we're not-
advertising and all that kind of good stuff, so.
Okay.
Yep. But as you can see, I mean, this is a big step. It's been ongoing for years and even years before that to get to the point of getting the money for this. And this comprehensive plan, though it's really important, is just the beginning. I mean, there's all those other documents that build off of this that need to be changed afterwards. But this is a great time to be a planning commissioner. This is a once-in-a-career opportunity.
Are there any suggestions on moving forward with this? Do we want to set some dates, or do we just want to put it on the next agenda to discuss what we've been here for quite a while today, to discuss how we want to break up the item? Yes.
Chair, we'll have to do at least the 25th of February.
As the first one?
Correct.
But we can discuss it at the next meeting how we're going to break it out, though. Could we not discuss it at the next meeting, how we want to break it out?
Probably better not to toy with that. Probably better not to mess with it that way. 25th, because of advertising, would be the best time to discuss anything.
Okay, for the advertising, okay.
Yeah.
You just tell me what the part that you're thinking about. I'm tracking.
All right.
Fair enough. So even the 25th one would be a discussion and then setting dates on how we're going to break it out and go through it.
Correct.
Okay.
And even if you want to set a chapter or two aside there to do it, we can. But I figure that with the new information and the guidance, I know a lot of you have already heard this, but this is also for the new commissioner and the board member and the planning commissioners never seen this presentation before. So now you can go back with kind of a new direction, new eyes on the document, and you may see things you hadn't seen before. So that extra time will probably be good.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I just want to make clear, this is a public hearing. This was noticed. So that's why we want to be very careful of scheduling and allowing planning and zoning the opportunity to publish 10 days in advance of any hearing.
Michelle, so with that in mind, as we move forward, if we do move to having the first discussion on the 25th and then setting other dates, are we going to have to look at 30 days in advance, kind of skipping through, or are we going to be able to hit every planning zoning meeting if we wanted to hit a couple of chapters at a time at each planning meeting?
There's no reason why in a single publication you can't notice that the Planning Commission will consider the 2040 proposed comp plan on February 11th, February 25th. So you could set out more than one date in a publication. We just want to make sure that every hearing date has been published, noticed 10 days in advance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Gary.
Just a comment. Since this chair is a rotating chair with the county commission members, I just want to, and this is kind of picking up a little bit what Catherine was talking about, but I think as we go through this, you're going to find things like the building codes and building inspections that you know that there's going to be a dollar value associated with that at some point in time. But from the Planning Commission standpoint, I think you have to look at that as, is that something that needs to be studied? We move that forward to be studied. Not necessarily to commit the dollars to it immediately, but to give that time and study. Because I do feel, I mean, that happens to be a subject matter that I feel needs to be looked at down the road for us. And obviously, if you're going to start establishing building codes, you do have to have inspectors. How far do those inspectors go? What are they going to inspect? We talked about one inspector. Can one inspector do that job? So there's a lot of things that are tied to that need to be studied before that would ever probably be implemented. But I think from this standpoint, from the Planning Commission standpoint, you look at it and you simply look at, is this a potential need down the future? And if it is, I don't think you have to be concerned about whether or not, what the cost may be. It just needs to be moved forward. Thank you.
But are you suggesting then that the phrase, the action item is really, rather than saying we shall implement, let's say we shall, evaluate, something like that? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, yes.
And if I could even touch on that to kind of jump ahead a little bit, even if building inspectors or building codes are decided upon, there's still a discussion of to what degree. Do you want them to look at every nail, every bottle, every thing of glue, or are we just looking at A general overview, is it put in the right place? Is the foundation okay? And then they're done. I mean, it really, varying degrees to start off with.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right. Anything further?
Enjoy the cold weather.
Enjoy the cold weather.
It's fun.
All right. Any further questions? Any conversation? Any?
So we're starting on the 25th?
I would think that would be good. And that meets our notification requirements is the 25th.
You want a specific chapter or two to talk? Do you want to go through 1 through 3 with that one?
I would think we could at least do 1 through 2. I have a feeling 3 might be a little longer. And I don't know what's on the docket for that day, so.
I wouldn't, is there any way we can set it up so we're not restricting it? So if we can go further, we do go further type of a thing? Or do you just want to specifically take it piece by piece?
Oh, well, when we advertise it, we don't have to say that we're going to go piece by piece. We can just say that it's going to be hearings on it, and then we can just hit those pieces if we make it to them, right? I mean, or is it, I mean.
Probably be, I think along that line, probably advertise for 1 through 4, and if you only get through 2, you get through 2, and you move the other ones off. But at least you could go to more than that.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office.
I just want to make sure we get.
I think if you don't want to limit yourself, it's just better to notice that the comp plan will be considered. Then you're not restricted. My concern is if that you say we're going to consider 1 through 4, it just creates the expectation you're going to get through 1 through 4. So I just noticed that there's going to be a hearing on the comp plan, and you work through the material that you managed to work through.
Could it be said that they're going to discuss the comp plan, but the desire is to go in chapter order?
I
mean, to prevent the jumping around from public comments or.
The notice requirement's just that you notice that a hearing will be
Right.
held on that subject, and I think that's preferable.
I don't want to box us in, but I don't want to leave it too broad where we're stuck too, and you're like, wait a minute.
No, I would just notice that there will be a hearing to consider the comp plan, period, and then you will work through the material as you work through the material.
Okay, sounds good.
We do have a goal, it's a rather ambitious goal of having a recommendation done before the end of May. The reason being is that there's 2 planning commission positions that change in June. So there's possibly 2 new commissioners that come on in June that would have to start fresh. So if this commission is looking to make the decision, recommendation would hopefully be made in May, so it can go up to the board. Now, it's ambitious, but I think it could be done.
We can do it.
Well, I don't see why we couldn't at least consider putting it on the agenda, for the notices for the next 4 planning meetings at least. And then if we look like we only get through half of it by the second meeting, then we say, well, maybe we add another 1 or 2 so we can do the advertisement appropriately.
Now, as the weather starts changing, your agendas are going to start getting longer. So there may be a possibility of having extra meetings on top of that. So just remember, it will be part of the regular agenda.
Right.
Bring lunch.
Or bring lunch. Yeah. So we won't really know what those are going to be because of the new applications that come in. We can kind of predict with the reviews that we already know about, but
Can we always put them at the end as the last agenda item off of the regular? Absolutely.
it would be up to you. Or you could always do it in the beginning because then you have a captive audience. It's really up to you.
What is y'all's take on that? Should we put it at the beginning?
I think we do it at the end, and I think I would like to see us informally make the decision that at the next meeting, it'll be chapter 1 and 2. Or
Right.
1, 2,
At least set the goal.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
just so I'm not unprepared if we were to say, oh, we've got extra time, let's keep
hit 3.
talking.
Yep.
Because I'll study each chapter.
You'll be coming up.
Than I already
And
have.
I agree with, excuse me, I was going to say that I agree with Sandy. We should have the discussion of the comp plan at the end because we have people that come for the items. And I just don't think it's fair for them to have to, if they're not interested in the comp plan, they just want to deal with their item, just to be sitting there all that time.
Right. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. The idea of a goal, I think that's fine if this commission here wants to say, well, to be prepared, we hope to look at chapters 1, 2, or 3, but I would separate your goal in terms of what you hope to cover from the notice, and the notice should just be notice of hearing.
Let the notice be general.
Yeah, I agree.
Mr. Chairman.
Got the concept.
Yes, Gary.
Just a suggestion to go along with it. I know the legal notices have to go out. But could we also do like a press release, which kind of explains a little bit of what the intent is, so the public themselves can understand that this isn't all going to be completed at one meeting, that it's going to be going through various stages?
We could probably draft something. I will tell you that this has been in the paper probably no less than 21 times.
Okay.
Also, these little cards you always see on the seats are even people access or information to get to the website. I think probably something could be written up that's a little longer than a release, maybe an article. Unfortunately, the news stations and newspapers haven't been that interested at this point. They were early on. There were some interviews, but we really haven't had anything since that we haven't had to pay for.
So you and Rick wore them down now that they...
Well,
I tell you,
people got out what they had to get out.
I kind of agree with Gary's point there, because just this weekend at a social gathering, a man from the Hill City area who went to 2 of the hearings is very interested in this. He asked me, he said, well, what's happening? What's the next step? Where did this just go away? And so I think, I mean, if you could figure this out and hopefully get somebody to pick it up, I think there are people out there that would be interested in that.
And we would definitely advise everybody to, if you've talking with any of your people that you know, to get onto the website, sign up for that list, because that does update anybody who's on it with what's going on.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. With that said.
Great discussion. Thank you.
Can I get a motion?
Oh, yeah, that
Say
too.
again?
You need a motion?
I was about to ask for it. I said with that discussion. Now, is there a motion concerning this?
I'll make a motion to consider the comprehensive plan on February 25th.
I'll second.
Motion and seconded. Now for discussion, do we want to add a few more dates on there just to have it? So when we advertise it, we can at least have it advertised for the next 3 or 4 meetings.
Do you need that now?
Well, if we're going to advertise it, we would have to set it out so that it can be advertised for those meetings. If we're going to do it as one chunk. Is that what I understand from you, Michelle? That you wanted, if we were going to do a series of meetings, try to do it so we could advertise them that way? Or does it matter in how we word it? Because I know, we're doing that with the Kroll meetings and making sure that it gets notified. I know it's a different thing, but I just want to make sure we're meeting the intent of the notifications.
What's important to note is before each public hearing, a notice must be published in our legal newspapers at least 10 days in advance of that hearing, excluding weekends and holidays. So that's kind of what restricts you in terms of when you may or may not hold hearings. So if you want to schedule a couple, 3, you may, and that will go all in one notice. But it doesn't mean you have to schedule every single hearing that you hope
right.
to. Does that answer your question?
So I would amend my motion then to consider the comprehensive plan on February 25th, March 11th, and March 25th.
That sounds good.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Any further discussion on that? To put it at the end of the agenda item, PJ, that doesn't need to be a part of the motion, right? We can just plan that at the end of it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's where it was today.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. That takes us to item number 9.
Item 9 is a motion to schedule a special meeting of the Planning Commission regarding Kroll Incorporated's application for mining and construction permits. The Pennington County Planning Commission will need to make a motion on the special meeting dates to hear the Kroll Incorporated mining and construction permit applications. Per the request of legal counsel for Kroll Incorporated, the request is to hold hearings in May for the Planning Commission on one or more of the following dates: Wednesday, May 8th, Thursday, May 9th, and Friday, May 10th. The Board of Commissioners will look to schedule their hearings the week of May 13th.
Any discussion on those days?
Mr. Chair, I would
go ahead, Rich.
I would be in favor of Wednesday the 8th and Thursday the 9th if needed.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I know that Ms. Hennies is trying to schedule dates that also accommodate the Board of Commissioners. I would note that I know the board may not be available the week of 13th, and then it would get kicked to the 20th, but she's here to address any concerns.
I don't know if it's a possibility. I'm sorry, Holly Hennies, Commission Office Manager for the Board of Commissioners. I don't know if it's possible for the Planning Commission to maybe address it and be done on just the 8th. It would allow the Board of Commissioners to have it on the 10th and possibly go on to Saturday the 11th. Otherwise, we lose the Board of Commissioners until the last week of the month for me to have a full board. So just wanting to throw that out there for staff and commissioners to think about.
That's new. Okay.
I don't know if this board is comfortable completing it in one session.
Well, I think it's kind of hard depending on how many individuals show up, you know, and depending on how much information we get. If we schedule it in the afternoon on the 8th, like we've done the last two, try to schedule them in the afternoon so we could meet some of the needs of the public, then if we carry later on in the evening and we shut it down, then we may have to come back on the 9th, and I don't know about that. But I also don't want to commit us by starting at noon on the 8th and mandating that we stay here until 5. I don't want us to, or 7, and us, you know, twiddling our thumbs until people show up until 7 either, because I don't want to box us in, and I think we've all had that conversation for a bit. But you're hoping that we can at least try to get it done by the 8th, because the Board of Commissioners are gone from what day to what day? They're not all available?
Those next 2 weeks, I've got some, well, I lose 3 of them the week of the 12th. I lose another one for sure, 19th. So just to expedite it for Kroll's sake, looking at Friday the 10th and Saturday the 11th.
When you lose them, you mean they aren't going to be, you won't have a quorum at the
Correct.
meetings?
I won't have a full 5-member board to make the decision.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kathy.
You know, here's my calculation. Let's say we meet from 3 until 8. That's 5 hours. We take 45 minutes for breaks. That's so we're left with 215 minutes. 215 minutes, let's say each person, rather than their 3, they take 5. That's 43 speakers. I can't imagine having more than 43 speakers. And if you're really hard, if you're really firm, they're going to be 3 minutes, and that will get up to 60 speakers. I think that's plenty of time one day.
Is that
if we're willing to stay till 8 o'clock? And I think
time calculation of staff to do their presentation.
Staff's got to present. Kroll's got to present.
Oh no, I didn't count that.
And then there would be
right,
rebuttal
faulty
time.
calculation.
And last time, I want to say we probably were 24 plus people.
Right, but if that's only 24 or 30, I still think we have enough.
Holly, but if we did start again on Thursday the 9th, if we were done by noon, would that not give you enough time for the 10th? Well, because the Board of Commissioners need to review it.
The Board of Commissioners need to review it. Statute dictates I have to have 24 hours to turn it around and get the packet material out and available. So we wouldn't be able to start for exactly 24 hours after you were done and the material's up.
I'm willing to take the chance.
12 to 8 with a break for dinner?
A 12 to 8 and a break for dinner.
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable with trying to get it done on the 8th. I don't know. I think it's something that should just get, it seems like it's been pushed along here, you know, by.
Oh, I agree.
Not.
And even if we stay till 9, it's not the end of the world.
I agree.
Do we advertise that we're going to be 12 to 9? Because if so, then we have to stick till 9.
No, I mean, you know, you're talking about a hearing that's months in advance.
Right.
People are going to know well ahead of time that if it's important to them, I feel they should either take the day off or make other arrangements to get their comments to the board in writing, to make the phone calls. If you guys start at 9 in the morning, I honestly think you can kick it out in one day.
We can't start at 9 in the morning. Too many people have protested against that.
But I think
they want to open more for the afternoon at least.
But I mean, if it's say from 3 to 9, that's 6 hours. I think we can do that.
I think that's plenty.
I do too.
If I can break in here real quick, Commissioner Drews, you are the board member on the Planning Commission in May, so this does involve you.
Yes.
Realize that.
That'd be 4 days in a row for you, maybe.
I mean, if this board wants to schedule 8 and 9, when the planning, or the Board of Commissioners meets next Tuesday, we'll see how we can work around it and see what other options they have.
Any further input on this?
No, my input stays the same. I think we can get it done on the 8th.
Say that again, Rich. I heard.
My input stays the same. I think we should try to get it done on the 8th.
Starting at what time?
3 o'clock till whenever.
3 o'clock till whenever. Just do one day, and if we got to stay here for 10, get it done.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
Do you all agree? We'll just push it as hard as we can and come to some kind of determination at the end.
That 3 minutes.
I will be firm on the 3 minutes. I will be firm on the 3 minutes.
Okay.
If that's the case. If we're going to try to do it in one day, I can do that. All right, well, then I'd entertain a motion. If we're all in agreement with that, I will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that I'll make a motion to schedule the special planning commission meeting regarding the Kroll's application for mining and construction permits on Wednesday, May 8th, starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that adequate?
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Kathy. Any further discussion on that one? I have a question. So for the building, PJ, are you going to coordinate to make sure that we have everything that we need to have the building open if we decide to go past, since we don't have a designated end time for this, and if it happens to go till 10 or 11, who's going to?
We'll work with Holly and Joan, and they'll work with the necessary departments, make sure it happens. Just, we've done it before.
Okay.
I'm sorry, they've done it before. They're good at it.
Just want to make sure. All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Meeting is set for the 8th.
Thank you.
County Board report.
The Board of Commissioners will hear the Planning Commission's recommendation from the January 14th, 2019 meeting on their February 5th meeting.
Any questions for PJ? All right, items for the public. I see no public here. Items from the staff. There's nothing on your list, PJ, but you've got something to add, don't you?
Yes, we have to add that we have nothing to add, sir.
Are you serious? You have nothing?
Covered everything today.
All right, well, awesome. Items from the membership. Anybody got anything here?
No.
All right, last item is adjournment. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Don't move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you all.